What if the only thing standing between kindness and cruelty was a white lab coat? Imagine being invited to a prestigious university, asked to participate in what you're told is a memory experiment. You sit in a quiet room, handed instructions. A calm man in a lab coat tells you to administer electric shocks to a stranger every time they answer incorrectly. You hear the man scream. You hesitate. But the authority says, please continue. And so, you do. This isn't a dystopian story. It's the Milgram experiment, conducted in 1961 by psychologist Stanley Milgram at Yale. Volunteers thought they were helping science, but the real test was their obedience. The person receiving shocks, an actor. The shocks, fake. But the reactions of the volunteers were painfully real. Most participants, ordinary people, went all the way to 450 volts, believing they were inflicting severe pain. Their hands shook. Some begged to stop. But when faced with an assertive authority, 65% obeyed. They weren't evil. They were human. That's the disturbing truth. Milgram's findings redefined our understanding of morality. It showed how quickly compassion can collapse under pressure. In history, from Nazi Germany to corporate scandals, the same defense echoes. I was just following orders. This study remains one of psychology's most haunting mirrors. It reflects not who we want to be, but who we might become when morality is outsourced to authority. And it begs the question, what would you have done? Would you resist the voice that says continue, or would you, like most, press the button and tell yourself it wasn't your choice? Behind obedience often lies fear, and behind fear, a surrender of conscience dressed as duty. What if your eyes couldn't be trusted? Imagine watching a video where two people are talking. While you're focused on their words, one person is quietly replaced by another actor. Their shirt color, height, even their face changes. But you don't notice. This isn't hypnosis or magic. It's called change blindness, and it proves how shockingly limited human attention really is. In one now famous experiment, researchers had a man ask strangers for directions. As they talked, workers carrying a large door passed between them. In that moment, the original man was swapped with a completely different person. Yet, over 50% didn't even react. They kept talking as if nothing happened. Why? Because the brain doesn't capture reality like a camera. It edits. If something doesn't directly challenge your focus, it gets overwritten by your expectations. In visual scenes, even major changes, like disappearing buildings or people, go unnoticed. A study showed two images flashing back and forth, with a single difference between them. Viewers often took several seconds, or missed it entirely. Filmmakers use this quirk to hide cuts. Magicians exploit it to distract. Your attention is a weak spotlight in a room full of shadows. And what if that spotlight is being guided by media, bias, or fear? Change blindness isn't just a glitch, it's a vulnerability. If someone knows where you won't look, they can hide anything right there, in plain sight. So, what else are you blind to? If reality can be altered right in front of you without a flicker of awareness, what does that say about the truth you live in? In the invisible change test, the most terrifying revelation isn't the change. It's your absolute confidence that nothing changed at all. What if a forced smile in the mirror could secretly reshape your entire emotional reality? Imagine this. You're hollow inside, but you curve your lips upward anyway. It's fake, mechanical. But your brain doesn't know that. This is the facial feedback hypothesis, a theory backed by science. Your brain reads your face like a script, and it obeys what it sees. When the muscles around your mouth form a smile, dopamine and serotonin begin to flow. Not because you're happy, but because your body is pretending to be, and the brain listens. In one experiment, people unknowingly mimicked a smile by holding a pen in their teeth. They weren't told it was about emotion. Yet, when shown cartoons, they found them funnier than others who didn't smile. The act of smiling alone changed their perception. It wasn't mood-following feeling. It was mood-following muscle. The face shapes the feeling. But this effect goes even deeper. Smiling through pain can reduce stress hormones like cortisol. It calms the body, slows the heart rate, and shifts how we interpret pressure. It even alters memory. Those who smiled during emotional recall remembered events more positively. A fake smile becomes a tool, a silent form of psychological self-repair, a neural hack you carry on your face. So, next time you feel like drowning, try this. Smile. Not for others, not to pretend you're okay, but to tell your brain it's safe to feel a little light. because sometimes the most powerful truths begin as beautiful lies worn on the face. The smile you fake might just become the hope you need to feel again. What if the memory you hold closest never actually happened? Imagine standing in a childhood kitchen, your mother humming, the scent of cinnamon in the air. You feel the warmth of the moment, swear it shaped who you are. But science says it could be a lie. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved memories can be planted. In her studies, participants were told stories about being lost in a mall. Later, they recalled vivid details of the event, despite it never occurring. Their minds constructed a reality from nothing. Memory is not a recording, it's reconstruction. The brain prioritizes coherence over truth. If someone says, "Don't you remember how scared you were when the dog chased you?" Your mind tries to please. It builds emotion, visuals, sounds, until the fiction becomes indistinguishable from fact. False memories feel as real as true ones. This changes everything. Eyewitness accounts become fragile. Recovered memories in therapy grow questionable. Entire criminal cases can collapse under this weight. Even loved ones can rewrite your past unintentionally. All it takes is repetition and trust. Think of it like a garden. Each suggestion is a seed. Repetition is sunlight. Imagination is water. Soon, something blossoms. A scene, a sensation, a belief. But it's not truth. It's persuasion. A well-told lie, memorized until it feels like life. In one case, a man confessed to a murder he never committed. His memory filled in the blanks after hours of questioning. That's the power of suggestion. What if a simple mask could turn a kind neighbor into a ruthless stranger? Imagine this: a crowd, faces hidden behind masks, begins shouting insults they would never dare say aloud. The anonymity isn't just costume, it's psychological transformation. This is the masked stranger effect, a chilling truth backed by science. When identity fades, empathy erodes. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo ran the infamous Stanford prison experiment. Volunteers played guards and prisoners. The guards wore mirrored sunglasses. No names, no identities, just roles. Within days, the guards, normal students, became disturbingly cruel. Humiliation, sleep deprivation, psychological torment. It wasn't fantasy, it was reality, triggered by anonymity and the loss of personal responsibility. Later studies deepened this eerie truth. In a Halloween experiment, children told to take one candy behaved differently depending on whether they were masked and anonymous. The masked children were far more likely to steal extra. Something primal awakens when we think we're unseen. Our moral filter weakens. The social brakes fail. Conscience flickers in the dark. Online, we see this unfold every day. Behind avatars and usernames, people spew hate, threats, cruelty. Words they'd never speak in person. The mask isn't physical anymore, it's digital. And each time we hide behind it, we edge closer to forgetting our shared humanity, our capacity for compassion. The mask doesn't create evil, it reveals what lies beneath the surface, suppressed by the presence of others. Strip identity away, and the raw truth emerges. Not always monstrous, but impulsive, unrestrained, dangerously honest. The question is, who are we when no one's watching? And how much kindness survives when the face is gone? What if your brain cared more about fitting in than being right? Imagine sitting in a room with 7 other people, all strangers. You're shown a simple image, one line clearly longer than the others. But when asked which line is longest, everyone before you chooses the wrong one. You know they're wrong. It's obvious. But when it's your turn, do you speak the truth or follow the crowd? In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of experiments that shook our understanding of independence. The task was simple: match the correct line length. But unknown to the lone participant, the others were all actors giving the wrong answers. Faced with unanimous agreement, nearly 75% of participants conformed at least once, even when their own eyes told them otherwise. This wasn't stupidity, it was survival instinct. Deep in your brain, the fear of standing alone activates the same regions triggered by physical pain. Disagreement feels dangerous. Conformity feels safe. Your brain whispers, don't stand out. Don't be the outcast. It's not just about answers. It's about acceptance, identity, survival. The Asch experiment exposed the invisible magnetism of groups. It revealed how social pressure can warp perception, judgment, even reality itself. From fashion trends to political movements, groupthink steers societies, not through force, but through the quiet terror of exclusion. People laugh not because it's funny, but because others laugh. They vote, post, and protest because the group moves. And dragging behind is scarier than being wrong. And that's the chilling part. The truth doesn't always win. Sometimes it bows to the majority's illusion. The next time everyone agrees, ask yourself, do they all see clearly, or is their vision shaped by the comfort of belonging? What if no one was watching you, ever? Imagine you're in a quiet room, rolling a die. No one can see what number you roll, but you're told the higher the number, the more money you get. Suddenly morality starts to blur. You roll a 2, but you report a 5. Just a little lie. Who would know? This is the dice guilt illusion. In a well-known study, participants rolled dice in private, knowing their payout depended entirely on what they claimed they rolled. Statistically, the average roll should land around 3.5, but across thousands of trials, reported numbers mysteriously skewed higher. More people claim to roll 6s than chance would ever allow. Why? Because when we believe we're alone, our inner judge goes quiet. It's not that people become villains in private. It's that the mechanisms of accountability, the watchful eyes, the fear of judgment, disappear. When the system stops watching, morality dims like a forgotten light. From inflating tax returns to quietly skipping steps at work, the dice guilt illusion echoes everywhere. Conscience, it turns out, might be less about right and wrong, and more about who's paying attention. But here's the twist. When mirrors were added to the room, or participants were asked to sign a code of ethics before rolling, cheating dropped dramatically. The moment people became self-aware again, even in silence, guilt returned like a shadow. A reflection, a signature, a reminder of self, all were enough to trigger honesty. Morality, it seems, isn't hardwired, it's conditional. So ask yourself, who are you when absolutely no one is watching? And if that version is different, are you sure which one is really you? What if the darkest parts of someone's actions could be blamed not on choice, but on genes? Imagine a courtroom where a violent criminal calmly says, "It wasn't me, it was my DNA." It sounds like a plot from a sci-fi thriller, but it's real. This is the rise of the genetic defense, where biology is used to explain away crime. And disturbingly, it works. Studies show that when people hear a violent offender has a gene linked to aggression, they feel less anger, show more sympathy, and often recommend lighter punishment. It reframes violence as a medical issue, not a moral one. This phenomenon is called genetic essentialism, the belief that DNA isn't just a part of us, but the essence of who we are. In a powerful study, participants judged a murderer more leniently after hearing he carried the MAOA gene, sometimes called the warrior gene. They saw him not as evil, but as biologically cursed. His crime somehow became fate. But that's a dangerous line to walk. Because when genes excuse actions, we risk erasing accountability. We become puppets pulled by biology, with no room left for responsibility, for conscience, for choice. If a molecule can be blamed, then where do we draw the line? Is anyone truly guilty anymore? Is justice even possible? The danger isn't in the science, it's in how we interpret it. Genes are part of the puzzle, but never the whole picture. Trauma, upbringing, environment, culture, and will. They all sculpt human behavior. So when someone says, "I'm just wired this way," remember, influence is not destiny. DNA may write the prologue, but we write the story. And what makes us human isn't what's encoded, but what we choose despite it. What if your silence isn't weakness, but a survival strategy? Imagine being in a room where everyone nods in agreement over something you find deeply wrong. You hesitate. You scan the faces, hoping for one sign of resistance, but you see none. So you stay quiet. This is the spiral of silence, a real psychological effect, where people suppress their opinions when they believe they're in the minority, even when they're not. German political scientist Elisabeth Noelle Neumann coined the term in the 1970s after studying how public opinion forms. People fear isolation more than being wrong. If you think your view will isolate you, you fall silent. But here's the twist. Everyone else is doing the same. One silence triggers another. The majority may actually agree with you, but no one speaks. A false consensus blooms, fed by fear. In rooms and families, truth stays buried. The spiral thrives in authoritarian systems, but also in everyday lives. At work, you stay quiet about unethical practices. With friends, you stay quiet to keep peace. Online, you scroll past injustice, fearing backlash. Each silence reinforces the illusion. The longer it continues, the louder the lie becomes. Silence isn't neutral. It becomes the script others follow. In 1950s America, during McCarthyism, people watched neighbors get blacklisted. Most disagreed, but fear silenced them. The spiral didn't just bend opinions, it shaped history. So ask yourself, what truth do you carry that you've never said out loud? And what world might exist if even one voice had dared to speak? What if the more people that surrounded you, the less likely any of them would save you? Imagine collapsing on a busy street, gasping for help. Dozens walk by. No one stops. You're not invisible, they all see you. But no one moves. This is the bystander effect, a chilling psychological truth. As group size increases, individual responsibility vanishes into the crowd. In 1964, Kitty Genovese was murdered in New York City. Reports claimed 38 neighbors saw or heard it happen. No one intervened. No one called the police in time. The horror wasn't just the crime, it was the silence. Psychologists John Darley and Bibb Latané began investigating this deeply unsettling phenomenon. What they uncovered changed how we understand human inaction. In one experiment, participants were led to believe someone nearby was having a seizure. When alone, 85% rushed to help. But when they thought others were also witnessing the event, only 31% responded. The presence of others didn't encourage action, it suppressed it. Responsibility had been diffused. Everyone waited for someone else to act, and no one did. This paralysis isn't driven by malice. It's confusion, hesitation, fear of embarrassment. We look around, take cues from others, and if no one moves, we assume it's not urgent. Our brain tells us to blend in. But in doing so, we abandon those in need. In a world packed with people, the greatest danger is that everyone assumes someone else will care. But if one person breaks the illusion, just one, it can change everything. Courage spreads, empathy ignites, and silence finally breaks. You don't need to save the world. Just choose not to be silent. Because the crowd is a mirage, and action always begins with one. What if the biggest illusion your brain ever created was that you're fine without sleep? Imagine staying awake for 24 hours. You feel groggy, yes, but still in control. You can drive, talk, work, but inside your brain, everything is falling apart. Neurons misfire, memory storage collapses, your emotional regulation crashes, you begin to hallucinate, and yet, you think you're fine. This isn't an exaggeration. Studies have shown that after just one night without sleep, your brain operates as if you're legally drunk. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for judgment, decision-making, and impulse control, goes dark. The amygdala, the emotional alarm system, becomes hyperactive. Small problems feel like disasters. You snap at people. You forget simple tasks. You misread faces and overreact. Even scarier, you don't realize it's happening. Unlike physical exhaustion, the cognitive effects of sleep deprivation hide behind a mask of false normalcy. In 1965, a teenager named Randy Gardner stayed awake for 11 days for a science fair. By day 3, he was hallucinating. By day 6, he couldn't form memories. And still, he insisted he was fine. It's a haunting example of how sleep loss breaks reality. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it makes you dangerous. It mimics mental illness, impairs your immune system, increases risk of chronic diseases, and short-circuits your sense of truth. And millions live in this fog every day, mistaking dysfunction for strength, burnout for ambition, and silence for control. So the next time you trade sleep for productivity, ask yourself, are you working harder or shutting down your mind while convincing yourself you're awake? What if the world wasn't watching you nearly as much as you think? Imagine walking into a room wearing a stained shirt. Your heart races. You feel eyes on you, judging. But here's the truth. No one really noticed. This is the spotlight effect, a powerful illusion where we believe we're the center of attention, even when we're not. In a groundbreaking study, participants were asked to wear an embarrassing t-shirt into a room full of strangers. They were convinced everyone noticed it. But when the researchers asked those strangers later, barely anyone could recall the shirt at all. The reality? We overestimate how much others pay attention to us, especially to our flaws. It's not vanity. It's ego-based survival. The brain evolved to monitor social standing. In ancient tribes, being disliked could mean exile. That fear still echoes today. Your mind paints a spotlight above your head, imagining judgment where there's none. A voice that says, they saw you mess up, or they noticed your nervousness. But those voices lie. Everyone else is too busy living their own spotlight illusion to live inside yours. And here's the twist. This illusion doesn't just increase anxiety, it can paralyze growth. You might not speak up, not try, not move forward because of a distorted fear of being seen. But the truth is liberating. No one is thinking about you as much as you are. You are not on stage. You are in the crowd, with everyone else, hoping no one sees too much. So, what would you attempt if you knew the spotlight was just in your mind? Because the moment you step past it, the fear loses its power. Maybe freedom begins when you realize you were never being watched at all. What if putting on a uniform could flip a switch inside you? Imagine an ordinary person, shy, quiet, unsure, slipping into a crisp military jacket or a security badge. Within minutes, their posture stiffens, voice deepens, gaze sharpens. They haven't trained for power, but suddenly they act like they were born for it. This isn't pretending. It's identity taking new shape. Psychologists call it enclothed cognition, the phenomenon where clothes don't just influence how others see us, but how we think, feel, and behave. In one striking experiment, participants wore identical white coats. Those told it was a doctor's coat scored higher on attention and focus than those told it was a painter's coat. Same garment, different story. The symbol triggered a mental shift. But when the role involves control, like law enforcement, military, or authority, the transformation can grow dangerously fast. The Stanford prison experiment showed this with brutal clarity. College students, assigned to play prison guards, became hostile, authoritarian, even abusive within days. They weren't acting. They had absorbed the persona, the setting, the power, the costume. It rewired their moral compass. It wasn't who they were. It was who the role allowed them to be. Human identity bends faster than we admit. Give someone a costume and a script, and they become the part. Leader, victim, villain, hero. Sometimes, all it takes is the room whispering who you should be, and a name tag that makes it real. So, before you judge who someone's become, ask yourself, is that really them, or is it just the story they were handed to play? What if the sound you barely notice is the one controlling you? Imagine sitting in a cafe when a strange unease creeps in. There's no danger, no confrontation, just an irritation you can't explain. What you're feeling could be a high-frequency sound, barely audible yet enough to disrupt your nervous system. Science proves certain frequencies, especially those between 17,000 and 20,000 hertz, can trigger anxiety, headaches, even nausea. They don't need to be loud, just precise. Known as ultrasonic or high-pitched tones, these sounds are used to repel loiterers or teens. The mosquito tone, for instance, is heard only by young ears, causing discomfort unnoticed by adults. Some stores use it to control how long people linger. Subways tested similar tactics, signals that shift mood silently. This isn't science fiction, it's psychoacoustics. Your body reacts to sound like it does to light or heat. Music soothes. But hidden tones can fracture your calm without consent. In one UK experiment, a shopping mall reduced teen loitering by 90% using high-frequency noise. The teens didn't know what was wrong, they just left. It's about wavelength, not volume. Even your bones can detect vibration. Your body is always listening, even when your mind isn't. The danger lies in its subtlety. You won't hear it, but your body responds. So next time you feel agitated for no clear reason, ask yourself, is it emotion or a frequency you were never meant to notice? What if ordinary people, just like you, could be persuaded to inflict pain on strangers simply because someone in a lab coat told them to? Imagine sitting in a bright room, a calm man with a clipboard instructs you to press a button. Each time you do, another person screams in pain. You hesitate, but he insists. Please continue. You obey. This was not fiction. This was science. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most disturbing experiments in modern history. Volunteers were told to administer electric shocks to another person whenever they gave a wrong answer. The shocks weren't real, but the screams were pre-recorded. The participants believed they were harming someone. Many protested, some trembled, sweated, cried, but most continued under pressure from authority. Over 65% delivered what they believed were lethal shocks, just because they were told. This is the wall obedience trap. When faced with institutional authority, especially the calm, sterile authority of science or uniform, our internal morals falter. The responsibility seems to shift. I'm not doing it, the mind whispers. I'm just following orders. The experiment wasn't just about cruelty. It was about the fragility of conscience. In the right setting, with the right cues, people relinquish judgment. They stop thinking and start obeying. Not out of evil, but fear, confusion, and social pressure. The scariest part? These weren't monsters. They were teachers, engineers, secretaries, people like us. And the line between kindness and compliance was thinner than anyone imagined. So ask yourself, where is your limit? And would you even recognize the moment you crossed it? What if the brain didn't believe what's true, but what's familiar? Imagine hearing the same statement over and over again. At first, you know it's false. You dismiss it. But the next time, it sounds less strange. Then again and again, until one day, you accept it. Not because it's true, but because your brain has heard it enough. This is the repetition truth illusion, a psychological phenomenon known as the illusory truth effect. It was first documented in 1977, when researchers asked participants to rate the truth of trivia statements. Those exposed to repeated lies began ranking them as true, even when they'd been told the correct answers before. Your brain is lazy in a very human way. Processing something new takes energy, but familiarity feels safe. Fluency feels right. So, repeated information, true or false, slides past your filters. Political propaganda, advertising slogans, social rumors, they all use this flaw, not to inform, but to infect. Repetition becomes a spell, echoing truth through sheer presence. And the most dangerous part? It doesn't just fool others, it fools you. People repeat self-lies. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. I don't belong. Say it often enough, and it becomes your reality, not because it's real, but because repetition forged belief. These mental loops become invisible scripts, guiding how you speak, act, even dream. The illusion isn't just out there, it lives inside your internal dialogue, in your casual thoughts, in habits you never question. So the next time something feels true, pause. Ask yourself, have I thought this through or just heard it too many times? Because sometimes the loudest lies wear the quiet disguise of repetition. What if the right choice felt wrong, just because you didn't make it? Imagine you're debating two paths, job A or job B. You choose A. Days later, your friend picks B, and suddenly, doubt creeps in. It's not about the job itself, it's the fact that someone else chose differently. Even worse, if someone else had chosen A for you, it might not have felt right at all. This is the twin choice conflict. Psychologists have found that people often reject identical decisions when they don't feel ownership over them. In studies where participants were assigned choices instead of making them, satisfaction plummeted, even when the outcomes were positive. It's not logic that drives regret, it's autonomy. The brain craves agency. When that sense of control is stripped away, joy feels forced, even when the result is exactly what we wanted. Now picture two people choosing the same restaurant. One decided on their own. The other was told by a friend. The food, the ambiance, the experience, it's all identical. But the first leaves satisfied. The second, unsettled. Why? Because control changes perception. Without choice, even pleasure can feel like pressure. It's not about what you get. It's about who got to decide. This illusion runs deep. In relationships, careers, education, even identity. If your life path was shaped by what others thought best, even if it looks ideal, you might carry quiet resentment. Not because you dislike your life, but because you weren't the one who truly chose it. So ask yourself, do you really regret the outcome? Or are you mourning the power you didn't get to use? In the twin choice conflict, the pain isn't in the path. It's in the loss of authorship over your own story. What if the moment you needed your brain the most, it betrayed you? Imagine being in a crisis, sirens blaring, adrenaline surging, everything on the line, and suddenly, You can't think straight. You forget simple facts, make bad decisions, freeze or lash out. This isn't weakness, it's biology. Under intense stress, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, planning, and judgment, shuts down. It hands the wheel to the amygdala, the ancient core wired for survival, not clarity or nuance. In one groundbreaking study, participants under pressure made decisions that mirrored those with drastically reduced IQs, not because they were less intelligent, but because the stress response hijacked their ability to reason. In real-life emergencies, car crashes, combat zones, even during exams, people report tunnel vision, memory blanks, or uncharacteristic behavior that later feels alien. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers as instinct. Fast, reactive decisions that bypass thought and feel right in the moment, but lead to chaos. The brain favors speed over accuracy, certainty over reflection. It wants to survive, not understand. Even elite soldiers and pilots undergo intense training to counteract this, to build a reflex that mimics thought under fire. So, if you've ever crumbled under pressure, it wasn't stupidity. It was a prehistoric alarm system overriding your logic. The lesson? Calm is a cognitive weapon. Learning to breathe, pause, and ground yourself isn't soft. It's how you wrestle back control from a brain built for danger, not deadlines. The random reward hook. What if the thing keeping you hooked isn't pleasure, but unpredictability? Imagine pulling a lever and winning nothing. Then again, and again. Suddenly, lights flash. You win. Your brain lights up like it struck gold. This is the random reward hook, one of the most powerful psychological traps ever discovered. Its secret? Uncertainty. When rewards come at random intervals, your brain releases more dopamine than when rewards are predictable. That surge creates obsession. B.F. Skinner demonstrated this with pigeons in the 1950s. He gave them food randomly when they pecked a button. The result? The pigeons pecked obsessively, unable to stop. Now swap pigeons for people and buttons for screens. Scroll, 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 then suddenly, a post makes you laugh. Or someone likes your photo. Or you win a tiny prize in a mobile game. You never know when. That's the hook. Slot machines are built on this. Casinos invest billions, perfecting the right mix of loss and near win that keeps you playing. Social media uses it too. Endless feeds designed for sudden delight. Notifications arrive as treats. Each one might be nothing or everything. And that maybe is the magic. TikTok and Instagram exploit this directly. Every swipe might show something funny, shocking, or rewarding. Even dating apps do it. Every match hits like a mini jackpot. Randomness hijacks your reward system. You're not hooked on content. You're hooked on chance. So ask yourself, are you enjoying it or just hooked on the unknown? The time warp bias. What if time wasn't constant, but bent around your emotions? Imagine laughing with friends, hours vanishing in what feels like minutes. Then imagine sitting in pain, waiting, watching the seconds drip like molasses. This isn't just perception. It's neuroscience. Emotion warps time. When you're engaged, focused, or joyful, your brain processes information more efficiently. Fewer timestamps are logged, so you feel like time raced by. But in moments of distress, discomfort, or boredom, every second is noticed, logged, and stretched. Your internal clock slows. The more unpleasant the moment, the longer it seems to last. In one study, participants exposed to fear-inducing experiences, like simulated free falls, estimated the event lasted longer than it really did. Why? Because their brains were logging more detail, creating the illusion of extended time. Another study found that people suffering from chronic pain perceive time as moving slower during flare-ups. Pain doesn't just hurt, it elongates experience. Even anticipation alters time's shape. Waiting for test results, for a call, for relief. These moments warp minutes into what feels like eternity. And yet, when we look back on them, they shrink. The memory collapses, even though the emotional weight was overwhelming. This is the time warp bias. Clocks tick steadily, but your mind isn't bound by their rhythm. It bends time around feeling, meaning, and memory. Time isn't a line, it's a sponge, expanding and contracting with the weight of your experience. So the next time hours vanish, or a minute feels like an hour, remember, your emotions are the real architects of time, and in that truth lies both suffering and beauty. The memory distortion loop. What if every time you remembered something, you were actually changing it? Imagine a childhood memory, clear, vivid, emotional. But here's the twist. Each time you recall it, you're not replaying it. You're rewriting it, like editing a document that saves over the original. And the more you revisit it, the further it drifts from what really happened. This is the memory distortion loop. Neuroscience confirms it. Memories are not fixed snapshots. They are reconstructed, influenced by your current mood, beliefs, and knowledge. You don't retrieve memories, you rebuild them. And in doing so, you lace them with today's emotions. That joyful day may now feel bittersweet. That argument might now burn hotter than it ever was. The love may glow brighter, or disappear entirely. This isn't just a quirk, it's a flaw in the system. Each act of remembering is an act of editing. The hippocampus reactivates, neural pathways shift, details fade, new ones sneak in, and you walk away thinking it's the same memory. But it's not. That's why eyewitness testimonies can be dangerously unreliable, why nostalgia lies, why trauma lingers. Your past isn't preserved, it's performed, newly, every time. You become the author of your past, without realizing you're rewriting the plot. Over time, your story reshapes to fit your present. Regret sharpens it. Healing softens it. Fear rewrites it in bold. Emotion becomes ink, and memory becomes fiction, wrapped in sincerity. So ask yourself, how much of your past is real? And how much is just the latest draft? Because memory isn't about what happened. It's about what you believe happened. And belief is always being rewritten, even now, even as you remember. The voice conformity cue. What if your beliefs weren't really yours? Imagine you're in a room with 6 others, looking at a simple visual test. You're shown 3 lines and asked which one matches the original. It's obvious, but then, one by one, the others all give the same wrong answer, confidently without hesitation. Now it's your turn. Suddenly, doubt sets in. Could they be right? This is the voice conformity cue. In a famous experiment by Solomon Asch, participants gave incorrect answers to simple questions, just because everyone else did. Even when the truth was clear, the desire to fit in overwhelmed their certainty. The brain, wired for survival, often prioritizes social belonging over objective accuracy. Being part of the group felt safer than being correct. This effect doesn't just happen in labs. It happens in classrooms, meetings, relationships, elections. When others speak with confidence, even if they're wrong, it pressures us to align, to conform, to avoid isolation. The voice doesn't just carry sound, it carries authority, expectation, and fear of rejection. Your mind doesn't just evaluate facts, it evaluates risk. And here's the twist. The more uncertain you are, the more likely you are to be swayed. But even confident people cave under pressure if the voices around them are strong enough. Truth bends, not because it's weak, but because we are social beings craving connection. The illusion is subtle, but profound. You may believe you're acting independently, but groupthink often scripts your choices. A room full of wrong answers can erase your certainty, if they say it loud enough. So ask yourself, how many of your beliefs reflect your truth, and how many are echoes of the loudest voice in the room? In the voice conformity cue, it's not logic that shapes your reality, it's belonging. The sugar pill healing. What if a sugar pill could heal you, not because of its ingredients, but because you believe it will? Imagine taking a capsule with 0 active medicine, and yet your pain fades, your symptoms ease, and your mood lifts. This isn't imagination. It's the placebo effect, one of the strangest and most powerful forces in medicine. Placebos don't just fake relief, they create it. When patients believe they're receiving real treatment, the brain responds with measurable biological changes, proof that belief alone can become biology. MRI scans have shown that placebos can activate the brain's natural opioid systems. Yes, your mind releases its own painkillers. In patients with Parkinson's disease, fake treatments triggered dopamine production in the brain, improving motor function. These aren't illusions, they're chemical events born from expectation and belief. The body listens when the mind speaks, if the voice is convincing enough. In one study, patients with irritable bowel syndrome reported significant relief after knowingly taking a placebo. They were told it was inert and it still worked. Why? Because the ritual, the context, the act of swallowing hope, all speak to the brain in ways science is only beginning to decode. But it cuts both ways. The nocebo effect, believing something will harm you, can trigger real side effects: nausea, pain, even measurable heart changes. The mind doesn't just heal, it can wound. So, next time you dismiss the power of belief, remember, sometimes the strongest medicine doesn't come from the pill. It comes from the story your brain chooses to believe. What if the mask didn't come off, even when the stage was empty? Imagine stepping into a role, a leader, a parent, a performer. At first, it's intentional. You project strength, calm, charm, but over time, the act tightens. The mask stops being something you wear. It becomes something you are. This is the role tension pull, the psychological strain that happens when your identity bends to fit a part you can't escape. The longer you play a role, the more your brain rewires to match it. Neural patterns reinforce behavior. Habits become traits. What starts as a choice becomes reflex. This isn't just theory. Studies show that consistent role-based behavior can shift personality over time. Soldiers become less expressive. Caregivers lose sight of personal needs. Influencers forget who they were before the spotlight. And the tension builds. You feel the distance between the inner you and the outer act. But to maintain the role, you silence that discomfort. You laugh when you're not amused. You reassure when you're uncertain. You perform happiness to avoid disappointing the expectations around you. Even the language you use changes. You pause before telling the truth. You hesitate to show doubt. Over time, authenticity feels dangerous. The role doesn't just shape your behavior, it reshapes your identity. So ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? If you've forgotten, the role may have already claimed you. The signal in silence. What if silence itself could trick your mind? Imagine lying awake at night, hearing nothing, and then, in that nothing, detecting a pattern. A whisper that repeats, a shape in the dark, a meaning emerging where none should be. This is not madness, it's how your brain is built. Your mind is a pattern machine, and it will find structure even in noise, even in silence. This is called apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections in randomness. It's why people see faces in clouds, animals in shadows, messages in static. Your brain evolved to find signals for survival. The rustle in the grass, the pattern in stars, the pause in someone's voice that hinted danger. Better to be wrong 1,000 times than to miss one real threat. In evolution, false alarms are safer than silence. But in a modern world flooded with randomness, data, silence, flickering screens, background noise, this survival instinct doesn't stop. People hear hidden messages in songs played backwards. Gamblers swear slot machines are due. Conspiracy theories form from random headlines. We connect dots that were never meant to be connected, forming stories out of chaos. The brain doesn't wait for confirmation. It creates logic out of nothingness. Even in pure silence, your mind whispers meaning. Echoes, warnings, signs. And once you believe there's a signal, you start shaping everything to fit it. Randomness becomes revelation. Noise becomes narrative. This is the signal in silence. A psychological glitch, yes, but also a window into how powerfully human minds crave story. Not because they are weak, but because stories are how we survive the unknown, how we hold on to control in a world that resists explanation. So next time the silence feels heavy with meaning, ask yourself, is there truly a signal or just the echo of your own search for certainty? The control button. Lie. What if the buttons you press every day are just placebo? Imagine standing at a crosswalk. You press the button to change the light. You wait. Nothing happens right away. But you feel better, like you've done something. In reality, that button may be disconnected. Fake. A relic of a time when it worked. But your brain doesn't care. It craves the illusion of control. This is the control button lie, an invisible trick embedded into everyday life. Elevator closed door buttons? In most buildings, they don't work. They're disabled to meet safety regulations or timed systems. Thermostats in many office buildings, they're locked or fake, designed just to give you a sense of comfort. And yet, we push, turn, click, believing we've made a difference. Psychologists call this illusory control. It's our tendency to believe we influence outcomes we don't. In experiments, people rolled dice harder when they wanted high numbers, soaked in ritual, believing action affects chance. In casinos, people talk to machines. On airplanes, they grip the armrest, as if tension could keep turbulence away. But the scariest part isn't the fake buttons. It's how this illusion carries into bigger parts of life. People vote in rigged systems, stay in toxic jobs, thinking effort alone will shift the outcome. They stay in broken relationships, convinced they can fix someone who doesn't want to change, because action feels like agency, even when the system ignores us. The lie isn't the button, it's the comfort we cling to, the belief that pressing harder means we matter more. But real power doesn't come from illusion. It comes from knowing when you're pressing and when you're just pretending to. The puzzle motivation reversal. What if praise could destroy passion? Imagine a child who loves solving puzzles, hours lost in concentration, joy found in every click and snap. One day you offer them money for each puzzle they complete. At first, it seems like a win. But slowly the spark fades. They rush through the pieces. The joy turns mechanical. Eventually they stop doing puzzles altogether. This is the puzzle motivation reversal. In a famous study, researchers asked kids to draw. Some were rewarded with gold stars. Others drew just for fun. Later, when the rewards stopped, the kids who were praised drew less and with less joy. Why? Because their motivation had shifted from intrinsic to extrinsic. They no longer did it because they loved it. They did it because someone else thought it was valuable. The moment an internal drive becomes a transaction, the mind rewires. Autonomy vanishes. Creativity collapses. What was once a game now feels like a task. This doesn't just apply to children. It affects artists, athletes, even professionals. Reward a writer per page and watch their words turn lifeless. Pay a musician per song and see the soul slip from their notes. Even adults who turn hobbies into side hustles often report feeling a quiet loss. The thing that once gave them peace begins to feel like pressure. The joy that once felt limitless now has terms and deadlines. It's the cost of monetizing meaning. It's a paradox. The more you reward a natural passion, the more you risk killing it. Because love doesn't bloom under pressure. It thrives in freedom, not control. Motivation born from joy resists being owned. So ask yourself, are you nurturing your passion or training it to perform? In the puzzle motivation reversal, the danger isn't in praise, it's in mistaking love for labor. The cold touch, disconnection. What if the chill in your hands could reach into your heart? Imagine holding a cold drink or stepping into a freezing room, and suddenly, you feel more withdrawn, less connected, emotionally distant. It's not in your head, it's in your skin. Studies have shown that physical temperature can directly influence emotional warmth. When your hands are cold, you're not just shivering, you're subtly shifting how much empathy you feel toward others. The body registers temperature, and the mind interprets it as social distance. In a now famous experiment, participants who briefly held warm coffee judged strangers as more generous and trustworthy than those given iced coffee. Another study found that people who recalled a time they were socially excluded actually perceived the room they were in as colder than it really was. That's because our brains map physical warmth onto emotional experience so tightly that even subtle changes in temperature can quietly sever feelings of closeness and trust. Cold does more than chill the body. It cues the brain to protect, to withdraw. Even judges in colder courtrooms have issued harsher sentences. Blood vessels constrict. Muscles tighten. Emotional openness closes like a door. We don't just flee discomfort, we flee connection. So, if you've ever felt distant or numb and didn't know why, check your hands. That icy touch may be silencing the part of you that reaches for others. Warmth, it turns out, isn't just comfort. It's the foundation of empathy, compassion, and the fragile bridge between us all. The failure recall loop. What if the reason you can't move on is because your brain won't let you? Imagine nailing a presentation, getting praise, applause. You feel good, but days later, you barely remember it. Now imagine a single mistake, stumbling over words, awkward silence. That moment echoes. This is the failure recall loop. Your mind clings to failure like it's a threat, because to your ancient brain, it is. From an evolutionary perspective, survival meant avoiding danger. Pain and rejection once meant exile. So, the brain evolved to highlight failure, replay it. It's a protective loop, meant to teach, but often it tortures. You relive the bad so you never repeat it. Neuroscience backs this up. Negative events trigger more activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and produce stronger memories. Success fades. Failure clings. The brain stores it as a warning, a lesson carved into your identity. But over time, the lesson turns into self-doubt. Think of students who can recall every failed test, but forget their wins. Or adults haunted by rejections, even after years of growth. The brain doesn't prioritize peace, it prioritizes preparation. But when preparation turns into paralysis, the loop becomes the enemy. Athletes remember missed goals more than celebrated wins. Performers recall the one person not clapping. Even in love, one breakup can overshadow years of joy. This isn't weakness, it's design. Your brain evolved for threats, not joy. So ask yourself, how many of your regrets are echoes? And what would your life feel like if the brain valued healing as much as it valued survival? The morality drift effect. What if your sense of right and wrong wasn't fixed, but rewrote itself to match what you've done? Imagine making a decision you swore you'd never make. At first, it stings. Guilt creeps in. Your heart races. But then something inside starts whispering reasons, justifications, excuses that feel like truths. Over time, those reasons become beliefs. This is the morality drift effect. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. When your actions clash with your values, the discomfort is unbearable. So, the mind adjusts. In one famous experiment, participants were asked to lie for a small reward. Since the lie wasn't worth much, they later convinced themselves it wasn't a lie at all. They rewrote their beliefs to match their behavior, not because they were dishonest, but because they were human. The drift begins with a single compromise, a shortcut at work, a betrayal in a relationship, a lie told to avoid shame. You promise it won't happen again. But to live with it, your brain bends reality slightly, then more. Eventually, the new version of right feels normal, not because it's ethical, but because it fits your story. History offers countless examples. Soldiers justify brutal orders. Executives defend corruption. Parents excuse emotional harm as tough love. With each act, the moral compass doesn't just turn, it recalibrates. Guilt becomes logic. Wrong becomes necessary. And one day, you no longer recognize where the shift began. This is why it's so dangerous, because you still believe you're the same person. But your morality has quietly evolved to protect your identity. So ask yourself, are your values steering your behavior? Or is your behavior slowly erasing your values? The remote viewer's bias. What if your opinions weren't really yours? Imagine scrolling through a dating app. You pause on someone's photo, then you notice it. The comments. So hot. 10/10. You take a second look. Suddenly they seem more attractive. But what changed? Not the face, just your perception. This is the remote viewer's bias. In a famous study, researchers showed participants pictures of faces. Then they manipulated the ratings. When participants saw that others had rated someone highly, their own ratings jumped. Social proof, not beauty, shaped attraction. The brain craves agreement. It leans on group consensus as a shortcut to safety, as if approval itself makes something real. And this doesn't just apply to looks. Think of product reviews, online likes, movie ratings. One glowing review can tilt your judgment. One viral opinion can rewrite your preferences. You don't just see through your eyes, you see through the eyes of others. The brain confuses repetition and consensus with truth, even when logic disagrees. Psychologists call it herding bias. Your brain evolved to survive in groups. When the group signals admiration or approval, you assume it must be valid. Evolution trained us to follow crowds, not because they're right, but because being alone meant danger. It's tribal survival coded into your neurons. And that's the trap. Popularity feels like proof. But mass approval doesn't equal truth. It equals replication. Opinion spreads like infection, contagious, invisible, and hard to cure. Over time, you forget what you actually liked. Your judgment becomes theirs. Your taste becomes algorithm. So, next time you feel swayed by stars, hearts, or likes, pause. Ask yourself, do you agree because you believe it, or because someone else pressed the button first? The emotional freeze trigger. What if the worst thing you felt was nothing at all? Imagine being in a high-stress moment, a sudden argument, a traumatic event, a moment of loss. Instead of tears or panic, your mind goes quiet. You feel nothing. Time slows. Emotion disappears. This isn't denial. It's not numbness by choice. It's the emotional freeze trigger, your brain's last resort survival mechanism. When faced with overwhelming threat or helplessness, some people don't fight or flee. They freeze. The body shuts down non-essential systems. Heart rate drops. Facial expression flattens. emotion goes dark. This isn't weakness. It's biology. It's the nervous system pulling the emergency brake. The same response seen in animals playing dead happens in humans too, especially in cases of trauma, assault, or paralyzing fear. But here's the twist. Society often misreads this freeze. People assume you don't care, that you're distant, cold, unaffected. But inside, your system is flooded. You're not emotionless, you're overloaded. And because the outside doesn't match the storm within, misunderstanding grows, isolation deepens. This response isn't rare, it's just invisible. Survivors of abuse, disaster, even grief often describe watching from outside their body or feeling nothing in moments that should feel everything. It's not detachment, it's protection. The nervous system choosing shutdown over overload. Neuroscientists call it dorsal vagal activation, the body entering an ancient defensive state to conserve energy and reduce exposure to harm. It's not weakness, it's evolution. And it buys time when all other systems fail. So ask yourself, have you mistaken someone's silence for apathy? Have you judged your own stillness as failure? In the emotional freeze trigger, the quietest response may be the loudest scream for safety. The reflection reversal test. What if the fastest way to gain someone's trust was to become their mirror? Imagine sitting across from a stranger. You cross your arms, and so do they. You tilt your head slightly, and a few moments later, they mimic it. You don't notice it consciously, but something in you softens. They feel familiar, safe. This is the subtle power of mirroring. When someone copies your posture, gestures, or speech patterns, your brain registers them as more trustworthy and likable without ever needing words. Psychologists have found that people who are mirrored in conversations are more likely to help, agree, and cooperate, even with complete strangers. In one study, waiters who mimicked customers' speech and tone received significantly higher tips. In another, job interviewers who matched a candidate's body language were rated more positively, even if nothing else changed. This isn't manipulation, it's hardwired biology. The brain interprets similarity as safety, as tribe, as kin. We are built to bond with what resembles us. When someone reflects our behavior, the brain's reward system lights up. Dopamine flows, defenses lower, and a bond forms, sometimes before we even realize it. This response lives deep in the subconscious, faster than logic, older than speech. Even newborns mirror facial expressions, long before they understand intention. But the danger? Mirroring doesn't require honesty. Con artists, spies, and professional interrogators use it strategically because it works, even when the emotion behind it isn't real. So next time you feel an instant bond with someone, pause. Are you connecting with them or with the version of you they're reflecting back? The mental fatigue leak. What if your worst decisions weren't about weakness, but depletion? Imagine waking up focused, disciplined, committed. You eat right, respond calmly, check off your tasks. But by evening, you're scrolling, snapping, breaking promises. This isn't failure, it's fatigue. It's the mental fatigue leak. Psychologists call it decision fatigue, the slow erosion of willpower with every choice you make, from what shirt to wear, what message to answer, what to eat, what to say. Every tiny decision withdraws mental energy. You don't notice it draining, but it adds up. By night, your cognitive bank is nearly empty. In one study, judges were more likely to deny parole in the afternoon than the morning, not because the cases were worse, but because they were tired. Another study showed shoppers who made lots of small decisions were more likely to give in to temptations at the checkout. Choice costs us discipline. This fatigue affects more than cravings. It colors your emotions, your patience, your ability to think critically. You're not lazy, you're spent. And modern life demands thousands of micro decisions every day. Each one a tiny leak, each one dulling your clarity. Even choosing what to ignore takes energy. That's why high performers reduce choices. Think Steve Jobs' same outfit daily or athletes eating identical meals. They conserve willpower for what matters most. Once depleted, the brain seeks easy, not right. That's not a flaw, it's biology. So ask yourself, how many of your nightly regrets began with a morning of too many choices? And what would your life feel like if you protected your willpower as fiercely as your time? The gloved empathy drop. What if something as small as a glove could make you care less? Imagine reaching out to someone in pain, but your hand is covered. The contact is there, yet distant. The warmth is dulled. The emotion? Muted. This isn't subtle. It's measurable. Studies show that touching someone through a glove reduces empathy. The mind registers the motion, but the body doesn't feel it fully. And where sensation fades, so does emotional connection. In one experiment, participants watched people in distress, some through direct skin contact, others through gloves or barriers. The result? Those who touched directly rated the pain as more severe and showed higher activation in empathy-related areas of the brain. A thin layer of latex, fabric, or plastic turned raw suffering into data. What was once a visceral human signal became distant noise. Your brain evolved to respond to touch. Skin-to-skin contact releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It builds trust in infants, calms anxiety in adults, and deepens emotional understanding during moments of grief, care, or comfort. When touch is filtered, the emotional signal weakens. What should feel close becomes clinical. We go from human to handler. This goes beyond hospitals. It applies to how we live now. Behind screens, through devices, through sanitized interfaces. Gloves become metaphors. The more physical or symbolic barriers we place between ourselves and others, the easier it becomes to disconnect. A slight delay in a video call, a text instead of a hand on a shoulder. It adds up. This is the gloved empathy drop. A simple, haunting truth. Even the smallest layer can thin the thread of compassion. When we don't feel others fully, we care less fully. So ask yourself, how many layers are you wearing between you and the world? The phone presence. Drain. What if your phone was draining your brain, even when you weren't touching it? Imagine sitting at your desk, trying to work. Your phone is face down, silent. You're not using it, but your brain is. Studies show that just the presence of your phone, powered on, within reach, pulls at your attention like a magnet. You don't notice it, but your cognitive capacity drops. This is the phone presence drain, a subtle form of cognitive overload. In 2017, researchers ran an experiment. Participants took memory and focus tests with their phones in different locations. Those with phones nearby scored significantly worse, even if the phone was turned off. The closer the phone, the lower the brain power. Even phones in bags or pockets still weakened performance. Why? Because part of your brain is always listening for it. That buzz, that ring, that flicker of light. The anticipation consumes bandwidth. It's like trying to read while someone whispers your name in another room, constantly. Even when silent, your phone promises distraction, and your brain allocates resources to prepare for it. You might think, but I'm disciplined, I don't check it. That doesn't matter. The effect is subconscious. The mere potential of a notification hijacks your working memory and divides your focus. It's like an open app in your mind, draining energy whether you use it or not. Now, multiply this by hours, days, weeks. What could you have solved, created, understood without that invisible leak? Phones don't just interrupt us when they make noise. They interrupt us by existing in sight, in reach, in thought. So, next time you need your full mind, don't silence your phone. Remove it. Hide it. Because presence alone is enough to steal your sharpest thinking. Real focus starts where the phone ends. The label influence study. What if a single word could change how you're treated before you even speak? Imagine two identical people enter a room. One is introduced as warm, the other as cold. That one word reshapes everything. How they're listened to, how their ideas are judged, even how others remember their face. This is the label influence study, and it reveals how powerful language is at bending perception. In a classic experiment at Harvard, students were told they'd meet a guest lecturer. Half were told the lecturer was warm and personable. The other half heard he was cold and distant. The twist? It was the same person. But the reviews couldn't have been more different. Those primed with warm saw humor, kindness, intelligence. Those told cold saw arrogance, aloofness, and detachment. This wasn't just about tone. It affected memory, interpretation, and behavior. People leaned in more, smiled more, and engaged more with the warm version. And they pulled back, criticized, and dismissed the cold one. One label, before a single word was spoken, transformed a person's reality in the minds of others. This illusion ripples through society. Job candidates, students, even strangers on the street, each framed by the first adjective used to describe them. And once a label sticks, it becomes a lens, warping every interaction that follows. It explains why first impressions hold such power, and why reputations are so hard to change. Labels create shortcuts in the brain, fast judgments that often outrun truth. And in a world where words spread faster than faces, perception can imprison the person inside. So ask yourself, how often have you judged a person, not on their actions, but on the label someone else gave them? In the label influence study, it's not the person who shapes perception. It's perception that reshapes the person. The place memory hijack. What if your memories were lying to you, shaped not by truth, but by the room you were in? Imagine recalling a birthday party from years ago. You swear it was warm, cheerful, filled with laughter. But what if the only reason you remember it that way is because you're thinking about it now, sitting in a bright room, sunlight spilling across the floor? This is the place memory hijack, where the environment you're in, while recalling a memory, rewrites the emotion attached to it, without you realizing. Studies show that people asked to recall events in brightly lit rooms remember them as more positive, even if nothing joyful actually happened. Dim, cold, or cluttered spaces do the opposite, turning neutral or happy memories sour. Your brain doesn't pull memories like files. It rebuilds them like scenes on a stage, and the lighting, temperature, and colors influence the tone. In one revealing study, participants placed in rooms with calming scents, soft textures, and warm light recalled childhood events with more warmth and emotional detail than those in sterile, harshly lit spaces. The mind doesn't replay memory like a recording. It reconstructs it from fragments and fills in the gaps with whatever the current environment offers. This has massive implications. It means your setting can distort how you remember love, pain, failure, or joy. The therapy office, the hospital bed, even your bedroom, these aren't just backgrounds. They're co-authors of your personal narrative. So, next time you trust a memory, pause and ask, is this what really happened, or just the mood of the room retelling it for you? The inherited fear trigger. What if the fear you feel isn't yours? Imagine panicking at a certain smell, a location, a sound, with no memory of why. You weren't hurt. You weren't there. But your body reacts like it remembers. This is the inherited fear trigger. In a groundbreaking experiment, researchers trained mice to fear the smell of cherry blossoms. The mice were given mild shocks every time they smelled it. Eventually, they froze at the scent alone. The shocking part? Their offspring did too, without ever being shocked. This isn't mythology, it's epigenetics, the study of how trauma can alter gene expression. The DNA sequence doesn't change, but chemical markers left by stress or fear influence how genes turn on or off. Trauma leaves notes in your genes. Fear this. Human studies reveal similar patterns. Children of Holocaust survivors show higher stress responses. Offspring of those who endured famine or war carry altered reactions to stress. It's survival written in code, except the danger is often long gone. You flinch, collapse, dread, without knowing why. Your ancestors might. And though the fear isn't logically yours, your body carries it like inherited armor. Trauma becomes inheritance. Fear often feels older than you, like an echo you were born with. Like trembling before anything falls. You inherit flinching eyes, braced hands, a heart tuned to old threats. It's not weakness. It's memory trying to protect you. But safety without reason becomes a prison. So ask yourself, what fears are truly yours, and which ones were whispered to your DNA by lives you never lived? The journey distance bias. What if time bends not by speed, but by familiarity? Imagine taking a long trip to an unfamiliar place. The road feels endless, each turn unknown, every stop unfamiliar. Now, imagine the return trip. It feels faster, doesn't it? Even if it takes the same amount of time, your brain insists otherwise. This is the journey distance bias, a psychological illusion where return trips feel shorter, not because you moved quicker, but because your mind processed the journey differently. Researchers have studied this strange phenomenon in depth. When people travel to a new destination, especially one filled with unknowns, they tend to overestimate how long it takes. Their brain is on high alert, constantly analyzing, mapping, and storing details. The unfamiliar stretches time, but on the way back, the mental workload drops. You've seen this before. You anticipate what's coming next. With less need to process, your mind condenses the timeline. In one experiment, participants traveled identical routes out and back. Despite the time being the same, the return trip was overwhelmingly perceived as shorter. Their memories compressed it, expectations shifted, The novelty was gone, and with it, the stretched sensation of time. This illusion shows up in more than travel. The first weeks of a job feel long. Years later, they blur. A relationship's early days feel vast, detailed. But as routines form, time speeds up. The more familiar the path, the faster the brain skips through it. The journey distance bias reminds us that time isn't just measured by clocks. It's shaped by memory, emotion, and the unknown. So, next time the way back feels like a blink, remember, it's not the road that changed. It's the way your brain tells the story. The fake-it habit loop. What if pretending eventually rewired your reality? Imagine you start smiling at work, not because you're happy, but because it's expected. You nod during conversations, act interested, offer help. At first, it feels fake, but over time, something strange happens. The effort doesn't feel like effort. The performance becomes comfortable, then familiar, then real. This is the fake-it habit loop, a psychological shift where pretense transforms into personality. Social psychologists call it the self-perception theory. Your brain watches your actions and starts aligning beliefs to match. You're not happy because you smiled. You smile, and your brain starts to think you must be happy. The signal flows in reverse. The brain hates dissonance, so it rewrites your feelings to match your behaviors. In one study, people held a pencil between their teeth, forcing a smile. They reported feeling better, even without knowing why. Another found that acting confident in social settings gradually made participants feel less anxious. The brain fills in gaps. If I'm behaving this way, it must be who I am. Behavior becomes evidence. Repetition becomes identity. But there's a dark side. People who fake agreement too often may lose track of their own opinions. People who suppress anger daily may forget how to assert themselves. Habit becomes mask. Mask becomes identity. And eventually, the line between pretending and being disappears. You can fake joy so long, you forget what sadness needed to say. This loop is powerful. It can elevate or erase you. So ask yourself, what are you faking today? And if you keep doing it, who are you becoming? Because every small performance teaches the brain something new. And if repeated enough, it stops being performance. It becomes you. The insight delay curve. What if your smartest thoughts happened after you stopped thinking? Imagine wrestling with a problem for hours. Logic, trial and error, frustration. Nothing works. You give up, go for a walk, take a shower, and suddenly the answer just arrives. This is the insight delay curve. It's not a fluke. It's how your mind really works. In cognitive science, this phenomenon is called incubation. Studies show that after intense mental effort, stepping away actually improves problem solving. Your brain doesn't shut off. It switches modes. Beneath awareness, neural networks keep processing data, reframing the question, reorganizing patterns. And because conscious pressure is gone, insight can break through the noise. In one experiment, participants were asked to solve complex puzzles. Half took a break. Half kept trying. The ones who walked away solved significantly more problems. The delay gave space for creativity to emerge. It wasn't effort that unlocked the answer. It was distance. The answer was born in silence, not struggle. Artists, scientists, and inventors describe it the same way. The breakthrough doesn't come at the desk. It comes while driving, dreaming, or doing dishes. Archimedes had his eureka moment in a bath. Einstein called imagination more important than knowledge. Even modern engineers report game-changing ideas arriving while gardening or listening to music. The insight delay curve reveals a strange truth. Giving up isn't failure. It's often the final step before success. Pressure narrows thought. Rest expands it. Walking away isn't quitting. It's trusting the deeper mind to finish what you began. So ask yourself, what if the answer isn't missing, but simply delayed? In the insight delay curve, your best ideas don't arrive on demand. They arrive when the mind is finally quiet enough to hear them. The blue room effect. What if just sitting in a room could lower your anger without you realizing it? Imagine stepping into a space painted in soft blue. You don't feel anything at first, but your shoulders ease, your breath slows, you're less reactive, less tense. This is the blue room effect. It's not decoration. It's biology. Science shows that color alters how your nervous system responds to the world. And blue calms. It's a visual cue that tells your brain you're safe, quietly, persistently, and without permission. Studies have found that blue environments reduce heart rate, lower blood pressure, and soften aggressive impulses. In prisons, some cells painted entirely in pastel blue have led to measurable drops in violent outbursts. In schools and offices, blue walls encourage focus, reduce anxiety, and minimize conflict. Your brain evolved under a blue sky, near blue water, places of survival, safety, and peace. So it associates blue with restoration, with calm, with the absence of threat. But here's the twist. You don't notice it happening. You might think your calm is coming from within, that you've matured, centered yourself, grown more patient. But your body is responding to color signals outside of your awareness. The room shapes your nervous system, and your nervous system shapes how you speak, react, and even think. The implications are massive. It means your environment isn't neutral. It's active. It's shaping your chemistry in real time. You don't just live in spaces. You're being guided by them. So, next time you find yourself unusually calm or less angry than expected, pause. Look around. The room might be holding your emotions for you, especially if it's bathed in blue. The eye contact control. What if the balance of power starts before a word is spoken? Imagine locking eyes with someone. Hold the gaze and tension builds. Look away and it softens. This isn't just body language, it's biology. It's eye contact control. Studies show dominant people hold eye contact longer, with more intensity. Submissive individuals tend to break it first. Eye contact triggers a subtle negotiation. In the wild, it signals challenge or surrender. Among humans, it sets the tone for authority, trust, and fear. A glance becomes a handshake between nervous systems. Neuroscience reveals that eye contact activates the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system. It heightens awareness, triggers adrenaline, sharpens memory. That's why a harsh stare lingers. That's why it's hard to lie while staring someone down. Your eyes reveal truth before your words can. Children of strict parents learn to drop their gaze. Victims of bullying or abuse often avoid eye contact as defense. Confident leaders meet it, projecting control silently. This invisible language governs interviews and intimacy. You don't choose how it affects you. Your pupils dilate under pressure. Your blink rate shifts. Your heartbeat reacts. Power starts in the pupils and ripples through posture. Even in animals, eye contact decides dominance. Wolves, primates, birds. In humans, it fuels politics, seduction, confrontation. A stare can say, "I see you," or "I own this." The difference is intent. So ask yourself, when you lock eyes with someone, are you speaking with your words or with your silence? The whispered words stick. What if the words that shape you most aren't shouted, but whispered? Imagine someone giving you a command in a loud, commanding tone. You brace yourself, you push back. Now, imagine someone leaning in and speaking gently, almost softly. You're not really good enough, are you? That whisper doesn't trigger resistance. It slips past your guard, and it stays. This is the whispered word stick, when quiet ideas lodge deeper than loud ones. Psychologists have long studied how suggestion works. It turns out the brain isn't just influenced by what is said, but how it's said. Soft, indirect language bypasses the mind's critical filter. It doesn't feel like persuasion. It feels like your own thought. And once it enters, it starts to echo, not as a command, but as a whisper that blends into your inner voice. In one experiment, subtle hints caused people to make different choices without realizing why. They didn't feel controlled. They felt natural. That's the danger. Loud orders create resistance, but whispers create belief. It happens in advertising, in politics, in toxic relationships. The damage isn't done with force. It's done with calm repetition. Maybe you don't deserve better. Maybe you're not ready. These aren't just sentences. They're psychological graffiti, etchings on your subconscious. And the quieter they are, the more permanent they become. This is the whispered word stick. A psychological effect with a chilling edge. What enters softly often stays the longest, because it feels safe, familiar, like your own reflection talking back. So, next time a soft voice shapes your choices, pause. Ask yourself, is that really your thought, or just the quietest voice you never questioned? The photograph, emotional bias. What if empathy could be altered as by camera angle alone? Imagine two photos of the same person. One is taken straight on, eye level, neutral. The other is angled from above or below. Same face, same lighting, same moment. But when people view them, their emotional responses shift. The eye-level photo evokes connection. The tilted one feels distant. Why? This is the photograph emotional bias, a subtle but powerful psychological effect. Studies show that photos taken at eye level activate empathy. Viewers feel closer, more connected, more human. But shift the camera angle, shoot from above, and the subject seems smaller, weaker, less significant. Shoot from below and they seem intimidating, dominant, cold. The subject doesn't change. Your brain's interpretation does. This isn't about photography, it's about perception. The camera lens becomes your surrogate eyes, and when the eyes tilt, so does the emotional frame. That's why journalistic portraits aim for level angles. It's why political ads manipulate camera height. A tiny tilt controls how much you care, and when repeated across platforms, it shapes your beliefs about someone, without you realizing why. And it doesn't stop at photography. In video calls, movies, social media, angle becomes emotion. Eye level brings equality. Above distances, below commands, your emotional brain reads these cues faster than thought, painting characters as victims, villains, or friends based solely on perspective. So, the next time you feel sympathy or suspicion, ask yourself, is it the person or the position? Because sometimes the difference between connection and indifference is just a few degrees of tilt. And when empathy rests on angle, reality becomes easy to bend. The elevator norm test. What if your instincts weren't driven by logic, but by the people around you? Imagine stepping into an elevator and seeing everyone facing the back wall. No explanation, no sign, just silence. You hesitate, then slowly turn around to match them. Why? This is the elevator norm test, one of the strangest proofs that social conformity can override reason in seconds. In a famous hidden camera experiment, actors were planted in an elevator. Their only instruction was to face the wrong way, toward the back. When unsuspecting strangers entered, they paused, confused, and then conformed. Without a word spoken, people adjusted their behavior to match the group. Not because it made sense, but because standing out felt wrong. This isn't stupidity. It's survival. The brain is hardwired to follow social cues, especially in unfamiliar settings. Going against the group feels like a threat, even if there's no danger. Deep inside, we still fear exile from the tribe, so we mirror, we mimic, we adapt. It happens in classrooms, boardrooms, families, and friend circles. People laugh when others laugh. They stay silent when others are silent. They pretend to agree just to blend in. You might feel a disagreement in your chest, but nod anyway. Not because you believe them, but because you don't want to be the only one who doesn't. In another variation of the experiment, actors began doing random things. Removing hats, spinning, crouching, and again, strangers copied. Not because of logic, but because the pressure to fit in was louder than their instincts. So ask yourself, how often do you follow, not out of agreement, but out of fear of standing alone? In the elevator norm test, the mind doesn't ask what's right. It asks, what is everyone else doing? And that answer often wins. The moral cleanser effect. What if guilt could be rinsed off, like dirt from your skin? Imagine doing something you regret. A betrayal, a lie, a moment where your values slipped. You feel uneasy, ashamed, stained. Then, almost instinctively, you wash your hands. Soap, water, you scrub. And a few seconds later, you feel lighter, calmer, less burdened. This isn't just symbolic, it's neurological. This is the moral cleanser effect, where physical cleansing reduces feelings of moral guilt. Your brain mistakes the act of washing for the act of forgiveness. In a groundbreaking study, participants who washed their hands after recalling an unethical act reported feeling significantly less guilt than those who didn't. Even more telling, they were less likely to volunteer to help others afterward, as if their internal scales had already been balanced. Another study found that after using hand sanitizer, people judged moral violations less harshly. Physical purity distorted ethical clarity. It's called embodied cognition. The idea that your body and mind don't operate in isolation. Touch, temperature, motion. They shape thoughts, beliefs, and even values. The act of cleaning doesn't just affect your skin. It changes your behavior, your empathy, your sense of responsibility. From religious cleansing rituals to courtroom oaths, humanity has always linked washing with purity, for a reason. But there's a danger. If guilt is too easily erased, so is accountability. The lesson dissolves with the lather. So, next time regret grips you and your hand reaches for the faucet, pause. Are you washing away dirt or trying to scrub your conscience clean? The proximity persuasion rule. What if the space between you and someone else decides who wins the argument? Imagine two people making the same request, one across the room, the other just a few feet away. Odds are, you'll agree with the closer one. This isn't coincidence, it's the proximity persuasion rule. Studies in social psychology reveal that physical closeness increases compliance. When someone stands nearer, their presence feels more immediate or more real, more commanding. Your brain interprets their closeness as a sign of confidence, importance, even authority. The result? You're more likely to say yes. This traces back to our evolutionary instincts. In the wild, those who could approach without being challenged were dominant. Space signaled threat or power. That same wiring still runs our social judgments today. A request made from 5 feet feels different than one made from across the table. In marketing, this is why salespeople lean in. In negotiations, this is why leaders close distance. Even animals do it. Pack leaders don't ask from afar, they move in. But proximity doesn't just influence obedience, it stirs emotion. Closeness builds trust or sparks anxiety, depending on the bond. Your body reacts before your thoughts do. In one experiment, researchers found that people were significantly more likely to donate money or sign petitions when approached from within arm's length. It wasn't the message, it was the distance. This subtle shift in space can sway outcomes in interviews, dates, and even jury decisions. Power isn't said, it's stepped into. So ask yourself, when you said yes last time, was it your choice? Or did someone simply step close enough to tilt the balance without a word? The sweetness emotion. Link. What if the flavor on your tongue could shift your personality? Imagine tasting something sweet, just a bit of honey, chocolate, or vanilla. Instantly, your mood softens. You're more open, more trusting, more generous. This isn't poetic metaphor, it's science. Sweet tastes don't just please the mouth, they rewire emotional behavior in ways you don't consciously notice. This is the sweetness emotion link. In a groundbreaking study, participants who consumed sweet foods were significantly more likely to offer help, volunteer, or make generous decisions immediately afterward. Their kindness wasn't deliberate, it was biochemical. Sweet flavors trigger the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine and activating emotional warmth. It creates a subtle emotional shift that makes you feel connected, relaxed, open to others. You smile more, you say yes more. Even more astonishing, in an experiment, judges gave lighter sentences to defendants after consuming sugary beverages. The sweetness wasn't just affecting mood, it was influencing justice. One flavor tipped the scale. Marketers have mastered this. Free samples in stores aren't just gifts, they're strategic. Candy, cookies, and sweet drinks aren't chosen at random. They influence your emotional lens. If you feel warmth, trust, and happiness, you're more likely to buy, to listen, to believe. The flavor opens the door, and emotion walks in first. This is the sweetness emotion link. It's quiet, powerful, and everywhere. We assume our choices are logical, based on facts. But sometimes, they begin with something as simple as sugar on the tongue. So, next time someone offers you something sweet, pause. Is it just a treat, or the beginning of persuasion you'll never see coming? The comfort compliance curve. What if your ability to say no was softened by a chair? Imagine sitting in a plush, comfortable seat. The room is warm, inviting. You're offered a deal, a request, a favor, and without quite knowing why, you say yes. Not because the idea changed, but because you're physically at ease. This is the comfort compliance curve. Studies show that physical comfort changes how you behave. In one experiment, people seated in soft chairs were more likely to agree with unfair negotiations than those in hard chairs. Another found that warmth, like holding a hot cup, made participants rate others as more generous and likable. The brain maps physical sensation onto emotional states. Soft becomes safe. Comfortable becomes trustworthy. Ease in the body creates ease in the mind. It makes sense. Your nervous system is always scanning your body for clues about the world. When the chair cradles you, the lighting calms you, the air feels gentle, your defense is lower. You assume the threat is low, and with that, your boundaries soften too. You don't realize you're negotiating with your environment as much as the people in it. Marketers use this. So do salespeople. Cozy spaces make compliant minds. The more physically secure you feel, the less likely you are to question, challenge, or reject. You're not being manipulated consciously. Your body simply tells your brain, everything's fine, go along with it. But comfort can be a trick. Agreement isn't always alignment. Saying yes in a cozy room doesn't mean it's right. It means it's easy. A soft cushion can invite hard consequences. So, next time you feel unusually agreeable, check your seat. Because sometimes, surrender begins with softness, and the most persuasive argument is the one beneath you. The familiar word, advantage. What if the truth felt true, just because it looked easy to read? Imagine seeing two statements. One is in clear, clean font. The other is in a messy, hard-to-read typeface. You're more likely to believe the first, even if both say the same thing. This is the familiar word advantage, where readability tricks your brain into trusting what you see. In one study, participants were shown factual claims, some true, some false. When the font was smooth and familiar, people rated the statements as more accurate. When the same text was presented in difficult fonts, skepticism rose. Nothing changed except the style. But to the brain, ease feels like truth. Psychologists call this processing fluency. When information is easier to absorb, we interpret it as more trustworthy, more credible, more intelligent. This extends beyond font. It includes word choice, layout, colors, even voice tone. Familiar equals safe. Simple equals real. In the courtroom, jurors trust slides with clean fonts over dense legal documents. In politics, campaigns use large fonts and short slogans to manufacture emotional clarity. In marketing, product claims in readable typeface are believed more, even when false. Complexity makes us hesitate. Simplicity makes us surrender. It's a dangerous shortcut, because truth isn't always simple. Some facts are messy. Some answers take effort. But the mind doesn't wait. It feels first, judges second. And clarity, even fake clarity, feels good. So ask yourself, how much of what you believe is rooted in fact, and how much is shaped by how it looked? In the familiar word advantage, belief doesn't follow evidence. It follows the path of least resistance, and that path is often paved in Helvetica. The listener echo trick. What if the key to earning someone's trust wasn't what you said, but how you echoed them? Imagine someone telling you a story. You nod, then softly repeat their last few words. Their face relaxes. They open up. They lean in. This is the listener echo trick, a psychological tool where repeating a speaker's final phrase builds trust and connection. It sounds simple, but it reaches deep into the subconscious and bypasses the mind's usual social defenses. In one classic study, waiters who mirrored a customer's exact order word for word received significantly higher tips than those who didn't. Another experiment found that therapists who echoed their clients' words were seen as more empathetic, more trustworthy, even when they offered no new insight. The echo isn't about repeating, it's about resonating. When you match someone's words, cadence, or tone, their nervous system recognizes safety. It's not just being heard, it's being mirrored. This simple act of reflection quiets the fight or flight response. The brain relaxes. People feel validated, even loved, because what they say matters enough to be echoed back. Conversations feel warmer, more honest, and trust builds in the silence between the words. But it only works when it's real. Forced repetition feels manipulative. The trick isn't mimicry, it's presence. You're not copying, you're aligning. The echo must feel like rhythm, not strategy. So, next time someone opens their heart, don't rush to fix or advise. Just echo, reflect. Let them hear their own words coming back with care. That's when true connection begins. The cold room rejection. What if the temperature of the room isn't just about the thermostat, but your heart? Imagine walking into a room and shivering slightly. The air feels colder than it should, but it's not broken heating, it's emotional isolation. This is the cold room rejection. When you feel alone, disconnected, or rejected, your brain shifts how you feel the world, starting at your skin. Psychological studies have shown that lonely people consistently rate rooms as colder than others do, even when the temperature is identical. Why? Because emotional warmth and physical warmth share the same neural pathways. The anterior cingulate cortex processes both social rejection and physical discomfort. When you're excluded, your body interprets it as a threat. It's as if your nervous system says, "You're not safe, brace for cold." In one experiment, participants who were made to feel socially rejected reported lower temperatures and were more likely to crave warm food or hot drinks. Isolation doesn't just hurt feelings, it rewires sensation. The chill isn't imaginary, it's embodied. This connection explains why heartbreak feels like a freeze in the chest, why silence at a crowded party feels arctic. Emotional cold becomes physical cold. Your body becomes a gauge for belonging. Even language reflects this link. Cold shoulders, icy stares, warm welcomes. We instinctively equate closeness with heat, distance with cold. That's not just metaphor, it's biology. When warmth is missing from your life, your body responds through craving, sensation, and shiver. So ask yourself, was that room really cold, or were you just missing the warmth of being truly seen? The accent prejudice bias. What if your intelligence was judged before you even finished a sentence? Imagine saying something brilliant, but in an accent that's unfamiliar to your listener. Suddenly your words sound less credible, less educated, less convincing. This isn't imagination, it's the accent prejudice bias, a deeply rooted psychological bias where people equate familiarity with intelligence and difference with incompetence. In controlled studies, participants were asked to evaluate identical statements, once spoken in a familiar accent and once in a foreign or regional one. Over and over again, listeners rated the unfamiliar voice as less trustworthy, less intelligent, even less friendly. The message was unchanged, but the judgment shifted. The mind filtered the voice through bias, not logic. Why? Because the brain is a pattern-seeking machine. Familiarity feels safe. It signals comfort. But when a voice sounds different, the brain must work harder to process each word. That extra cognitive load triggers subtle resistance. Confusion becomes discomfort, and discomfort breeds doubt. The listener doesn't realize they're struggling, so they assume the speaker is the problem. This effect shows up in job interviews, classrooms, courtrooms, even casual conversations. A brilliant point can be dismissed simply because it doesn't sound like how smart should sound. And the danger is, most people don't know they're doing it. It feels natural, but it's not fair. The accent prejudice bias isn't just about language, it's about identity. It punishes difference. It rewards conformity. It forces people to code switch, to change the music of their voice to be heard, let alone respected. So, next time you hear a voice that feels off, pause. Ask yourself, is this really about what's being said, or just the echo of your own expectations? The choice paralysis trap. What if too much freedom could trap you? Imagine standing in front of a shelf filled with 50 kinds of cereal, or scrolling endlessly through movie titles, or browsing hundreds of dating profiles. The possibilities feel endless, and that's the problem. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to choose. And when you do, satisfaction drops. This is the choice paralysis trap. Psychologist Barry Schwartz called it the paradox of choice. In one experiment, shoppers were more likely to buy jam when offered 6 flavors than when offered 24. Why? Because too many options create cognitive overload. You overthink. You second guess. You fear missing out. The decision becomes a burden, not a privilege. It becomes a mental tax you pay for the illusion of freedom. Your brain treats each choice like a potential regret. What if the other cereal was better? What if I swipe one more time? The more paths available, the more responsibility you feel for picking the wrong one. And that pressure steals your joy, even after the decision is made. Choice becomes a maze, not a gift. We think freedom means more options, but real freedom is clarity, direction, simplicity. Too many doors don't feel like opportunity. They feel like risk. So we stall, postpone, walk away, or make a choice and feel less satisfied because of what we didn't choose. The mind replays alternatives. Regret becomes echo. This trap affects everything: shopping, careers, relationships, identity. In a world obsessed with customization, we forget that choice has a cost: peace of mind. Simpler paths often hold deeper meaning, not because they limit you, but because they anchor you. So, the next time you feel stuck, remember, narrowing your focus isn't losing freedom, it's reclaiming it. Sometimes less truly is more, and the clearest path forward might be the one with fewer signs. The candle problem, blindness. What if the answer was in front of you, but you couldn't see it, simply because of how it was labeled. Imagine being given a candle, a box of tacks, and a matchbook. The goal? Attach the candle to a wall so it doesn't drip on the table. Most people fail. Why? Because they see the box as just a container. But the trick is to empty it and use it as a platform. This is the candle problem blindness. Psychologist Carl Dunker first tested this in the 1940s. When participants were given the same materials, but with the tacks laid beside the box instead of inside it, far more solved the puzzle. The only thing that changed was context. The label shaped their logic. They didn't see a box. They saw a container. Function was fixed in place by familiarity. This is called functional fixedness, a cognitive bias where objects are only seen for their primary use. A hammer hammers, a fork forks, a box holds, but creativity lives outside of that instinct. Insight begins when labels are broken. It's not intelligence that blinds us, it's assumptions. And this doesn't just affect puzzles. It shapes how we see people, jobs, problems, and even ourselves. A student labeled difficult might be gifted. A coworker seen as quiet might be deeply analytical. A failed project could be the foundation of your next breakthrough. But if we lock meaning too quickly, we trap possibilities inside mental boxes. We live inside a world of names, roles, functions. But labels aren't truth, they're shortcuts. And the more familiar something is, the less we question it. That's how we miss what it could become. So ask yourself, what are you mislabeling in your life? What familiar object or idea hides untapped potential simply because you haven't questioned its name? In the candle problem blindness, the problem isn't the object. It's how we've been taught to see it. The boxed identity effect. What if the words you use to describe yourself became the cage you live in? Imagine someone asks you to describe yourself in 3 words. You say, loyal, quiet, kind. From that moment on, your brain starts guarding that definition. You hesitate to speak up in meetings because quiet must be maintained. You forgive people who hurt you because kind must never become cruel. You stay in painful relationships because loyal means never walking away. This is the boxed identity effect, where self-definition slowly becomes self-limitation. Psychologists have found that when people condense their identity into a handful of words, they unconsciously begin performing those traits. Not because they have to, but because consistency feels safe. The brain equates identity with stability, so any deviation feels like a betrayal of self. You stop acting on impulse. You start editing yourself to match the script. This effect grows stronger with repetition. Social media bios, resumes, dating profiles, all ask you to shrink into a slogan. And the more you repeat it, the more it owns you. You stop evolving. You stop exploring. You start mistaking the words for the truth. Your life becomes a defense of a label, not a discovery of what lies beyond it. But here's the danger. Identity isn't fixed. It's fluid. It shifts with time, experience, and growth. So ask yourself, are you living freely or just protecting the words you once said under pressure? Next time someone asks who you are, pause. Don't reach for labels. Reach for curiosity. Because the real you isn't a phrase. The real you is still unfolding, and no box can contain that. The packing priority, illusion. What if the thing you forget to pack is the thing you need the most? Imagine preparing for a trip. You pack the big items first, clothes, chargers, books. But somehow, your toothbrush, medication, or phone cord gets left behind. This isn't just bad memory. It's the packing priority illusion. Your brain doesn't rank items by importance. It ranks them by context. Frequently used essentials become invisible. Used daily, they fade from notice. They're not novel. They're not new. So, while you're focused on packing, your mind assumes familiar items will handle themselves. It's the same reason people forget passports on international flights, but never forget their luggage, or why seasoned performers can forget lines they've rehearsed 1,000 times. Repetition files them under already handled. Psychologists call this attentional saturation. When an item blends into your routine, your brain stops flagging it as urgent. The result? You remember the extras and forget the essentials. Even doctors forget their stethoscopes. Even chefs forget knives. The brain sees constant presence as permanent, until it's too late. You expect essentials to show up because they always do. But expectations aren't memory. They're assumptions. And assumptions don't pack bags. That's why checklists work. They snap your brain out of assumption. This illusion also affects habits, relationships, self-care. We overlook what's always around us, until it's missing. Familiarity doesn't just breed contempt, it breeds forgetfulness. So ask yourself, what crucial thing are you about to forget? Just because it was always there. The illusion of control. What if the feeling of control was just that? A feeling, not reality. Imagine playing a game of chance. You shake the dice harder when you want a high number and toss it gently when the stakes are low. Somewhere inside, it feels like force equals influence, but the outcome is still random. This is the illusion of control, a psychological trap where people believe they can influence things that are actually governed by chance. In classic experiments, participants rolled dice and were told the results were completely random. Yet when they wanted better outcomes, they threw harder, slower, more deliberately. They behaved as if the intensity of their action could shift the odds. The logic is flawed, but the feeling is powerful, especially when uncertainty is high. The illusion grows stronger under tension. When life feels unstable, we grip harder, even when there's nothing to hold on to. We wear lucky clothes, follow rituals, repeat patterns that once worked. Tap the elevator button twice. Wait 3 seconds before taking a shot. These actions feel like choices, but they're actually psychological bandages for unpredictability. The illusion of control offers comfort. It gives us a sense of agency in a chaotic world, but that comfort can lead us into traps. Overconfidence, bad bets, wasted time. It can make us chase outcomes that were never in our hands to begin with. Marketers, game designers, and casinos exploit this constantly. Slot machines flash and pause at just the right moment to suggest near wins. Apps show loading wheels to mimic progress. It feels like timing, like precision, like you're close. But it's all design. So, next time you grip the dice tighter or insist the third time's the charm, ask yourself, are you controlling the moment or simply calming your fear of randomness? The split brain revelation. What if you're not one self, but two? Imagine a patient who undergoes surgery to stop seizures. The procedure severs the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves connecting the brain's hemispheres. Afterward, something strange happens. When an object is shown only to the left eye, the right brain sees it, but the patient says they see nothing. Then, without thinking, their left hand reaches out and grabs it. This is the split brain revelation, one of the most shocking discoveries in neuroscience. With the hemispheres disconnected, patients become two minds in one body. Each side can perceive, process, even act, without the other knowing. In some cases, the left hand, controlled by the right brain, would button a shirt while the right hand unbuttoned it. One side says yes. The other says no. The brain becomes a battlefield of intentions. Why? Because language centers usually live in the left hemisphere. When only the right brain sees something, the person can't verbalize it, but they can draw it, point to it, react to it. It's like discovering a silent twin inside your skull, intelligent, capable, yet voiceless. This twin isn't imaginary. It's real, functional, and hidden in plain sight. The revelation is this: consciousness is not unified, it's stitched together. What feels like a single stream of awareness is really a fragile alliance of parts. When the bridge breaks, the illusion breaks with it. You don't lose your mind. You reveal its architecture. The self you trust turns out to be a narrative woven from divided systems. So, who are you, really? The speaker, the listener, the one who reaches out, or the one who explains it later? Maybe the I you think you are is just a truce between hemispheres, and that truce can be broken. And once broken, you see it. The mind was never one voice. It was always a chorus pretending to be solo. The coin flip relief. What if a coin knew your truth better than you did? Imagine agonizing over a decision. Two options, both unclear. You flip a coin, heads, and your stomach drops. Not because of the result, but because of your reaction. That instant feeling tells you what you really wanted all along. This is the coin flip relief. Not a tool for decision-making, but a mirror for buried truth. People often use coins in moments of uncertainty, but it's not about chance, it's about clarity. The moment the coin leaves your hand, the illusion of indecision shatters. Deep down, you already knew what you wanted. You were just afraid to choose. The coin just gave your desire a voice. Psychologists call this emotional contrast. When faced with a forced outcome, your body reacts. relief, regret, tension, peace. That response bypasses logic. It's raw, immediate, and revealing. The coin doesn't decide for you. It makes your hidden preference impossible to ignore. This method is powerful because we often bury our instincts under layers of overthinking. We fear regret, judgment, or consequences. So we stall. We make pro-con lists, seek advice, ask the universe for signs. But the truth is already inside us, waiting to be felt, not calculated. Real breakthroughs often come in the split second of emotional honesty. You flip the coin and feel dread, so you know you were leaning the other way. You flip and feel relief, so you realize that's what you hoped for all along. The flip is just a ritual. The reaction is the answer. So ask yourself, are you stuck because you don't know what to do, or because you're scared to admit what you already want? In the coin flip relief, the answer isn't in the flip. It's in how it makes you feel the moment it lands. The moral compass drift. What if your sense of right and wrong wasn't steady, but swayed with the people around you? Imagine walking into a group where everyone lies just a little, cheats just a bit, bends rules quietly. You tell yourself you're different, but over time, your standards shift. You excuse things you once judged. You copy the norm. This is the moral compass drift, where personal ethics slowly orbit the behaviors of others, even when you believe you're immune to influence. In one revealing study, participants watched actors cheat on a simple test. Those exposed to the dishonesty were significantly more likely to cheat themselves later on, not because they suddenly turned unethical, but because the baseline for acceptable had subtly moved. Morality, it turns out, isn't fixed in stone. It's more like a weather vane, constantly tilting in response to the winds of group behavior. Humans are social creatures. Belonging often feels more urgent than being right. So, we don't always change because we're convinced, we change because we're surrounded. If everyone at the table is cutting corners, you'll start reaching for the knife too, just to avoid being the odd one out. And once your moral compass drifts, you rarely notice. You just feel more normal. This explains how entire institutions tolerate corruption, how cultures uphold harmful norms, how good people stay silent in broken rooms. We don't leap into wrongdoing. We slide into it, inch by inch, justified by the crowd. So next time your gut feels off but the room seems fine, pause. Are you acting on your values or orbiting someone else's? Because a true compass doesn't point to consensus. It points to truth, even if no one else is facing north. The shouting mirror effect. What if anger isn't just expressed, but echoed? Imagine someone yelling at you, face flushed, voice sharp. Your instinct tightens. Yell back, defend, match the heat. But here's the twist. When you match their aggression, it grows. When you don't, it crumbles. This is the shouting mirror effect. Psychology tells us that emotions, especially intense ones like anger, are contagious. The brain mirrors what it sees. Mirror neurons reflect the emotional state across from you. That's why shouting invites more shouting. It's not weakness. It's wiring. But silence rewrites the script. In one study, participants exposed to aggression who responded calmly de-escalated situations faster than those who mirrored it. When aggression is not reflected back, it loses fuel. The mirror cracks. Without resistance, the shout becomes a shadow, loud but unsupported. Think of arguments that exploded because both sides kept raising their voice. Now imagine one person lowering their voice and pausing. The volume collapses under its own weight. This isn't passivity. It's power. Parents use it. Teachers, negotiators, even animals submit not through fight, but stillness. Silence isn't absence. It's redirection. In heated debates, it's not the loudest voice that wins. It's the calmest one that steadies the room. A calm tone disarms and redirects. It sends a message louder than any shout. I won't be pulled into your storm. It shows up in politics, parenting, and relationships. The one who stays composed becomes the emotional anchor. Not from lack of emotion, but from choice. So ask yourself, next time someone shouts, will you be their mirror or their undoing? The family role loop. What if your place in the family shaped more than your childhood? What if it shaped your fate? Imagine being the firstborn. You're praised, watched, expected to lead. You carry responsibility like armor. Now imagine being the middle child, constantly adapting, learning to compromise, becoming the invisible thread that holds the family together. Or the youngest, spoiled, underestimated, or ignored, always pushing boundaries just to be seen. These roles don't vanish with age, they echo. This is the family role loop, where birth order molds behavior, and those patterns ripple through generations. Psychologists have studied birth order for decades. Firstborns often grow into leaders, structured, cautious, responsible, driven by approval. Middle children become diplomats, flexible and relational, skilled at peacekeeping, but often overlooked. Youngest siblings are more likely to challenge rules, take risks, and question authority. It's not just parenting, it's positioning. Who you were in the lineup changes how you see the world, how you move through it, and how you define success. In one study, researchers found that firstborns were statistically more likely to become CEOs, doctors, or astronauts. They often choose structure, authority, and stability. Meanwhile, younger siblings showed higher rates of creativity, entrepreneurship, and rebellion. They didn't follow the path, they carved a new one, but the loop doesn't stop with you. These roles get reinforced across generations. A firstborn raises their own children with structure and high standards. A youngest might parent with playfulness or leniency. The cycle continues. You pass down not just genetics, but the echoes of your family position. This is the family role loop. It's not destiny, but it is direction. So ask yourself, not just who you are, but where you stood in line. Because sometimes, the order you're born into becomes the story you live by. The goal-distance blur. What if getting close to a goal made you more likely to fail it? Imagine training for a marathon. You've come so far, just a few miles left. But instead of pushing harder, you slow down, relax, or picture finishing a project. The end is near, and suddenly, you lose momentum. This is the goal-distance blur. Psychologists have found that when people approach the finish line, their brain miscalculates. Progress feels bigger than it is. In one study, students studying for exams slackened once they felt almost ready, even if they weren't. Another study on fundraising showed donations dropped when a campaign neared its target. Why? Because the brain confuses proximity with completion. Near becomes done, even when it's not. This illusion creates a dangerous confidence. You tell yourself, I'm nearly there. And with that belief, urgency fades. You underestimate the final stretch. You treat the most critical steps as a victory lap. But the final 5% often demands more precision, not less. It's the phase where fatigue sets in, and distraction disguises itself as reward. It's the same in habits, weight loss, deadlines, negotiations. The closer you are, the more tempting it is to coast. The reward feels pre-earned. Momentum thins out. And that's when errors multiply. Not because of difficulty, but because of belief. Your brain stops racing before your body does. The blur at the finish line isn't harmless. It's a trap, a psychological mirage. And it's why races are lost in the final moments, why books stay unpublished at the last chapter, and why dreams collapse just before impact. So, when you feel closest, double down, sharpen. Don't trust the blur, because near is not done, and done is what counts. And the last 5%? It's not the end, it's the test. The TV laugh track bias. What if laughter wasn't about humor, but about permission? Imagine watching a sitcom with canned laughter. A joke lands, and suddenly the audience bursts into laughter. You smile, maybe even chuckle. But was it funny? Or did the sound tell you it was? This is the TV laugh track bias, a strange psychological effect where your brain confuses social cues with real emotion. In multiple studies, jokes rated as mediocre were perceived as significantly funnier when paired with laugh tracks. The artificial laughter activated your social circuits. You weren't reacting to the joke, you were reacting to the idea that others were. Your brain, trained to mimic the group, followed along. Laughter, like yawning or crying, is contagious. This phenomenon traces back to the 1950s, when producers realized that real audiences didn't laugh enough. So they added pre-recorded laughs. And it worked. Suddenly, shows felt warmer, punchlines landed harder, and silence didn't feel awkward. We didn't just hear laughter, we absorbed it. But this goes deeper. In daily life, we rely on group cues to define emotions. You're more likely to laugh in a movie theater than watching the same film alone. You're more likely to enjoy a speech if others applaud. Social energy becomes emotional proof. This makes laugh tracks powerful, but also dangerous, because they can manufacture consensus where there is none. On social media, the same principle applies. A joke with thousands of likes seems funnier. A meme with a viral laugh track feels sharper. But is it? Or are we being pulled by the gravity of reaction? So ask yourself, how often do you laugh? Not because something's funny, but because you were told it should be. In the TV laugh track bias, humor doesn't trigger laughter. Laughter triggers humor, and sometimes, all it takes to laugh is hearing someone else do it first. The color emotions sync. What if your mood was shaped before you even had a chance to think, shaped by color? Imagine stepping into a room bathed in red light. Your heart races. You feel alert, maybe even anxious. Now picture that same room in green. Your breathing slows. You feel grounded. These are not random associations. This is the color emotion sync, where specific hues trigger emotional and physiological changes long before your mind catches up. Red activates the sympathetic nervous system. It raises your pulse, sharpens attention, and increases urgency. That's why it's used in warning signs, sales ads, and emergency buttons. Your brain reads it as danger, as adrenaline, as time running out. Green, on the other hand, is linked to nature, growth, and calm. It lowers cortisol levels and eases mental tension. It's why hospitals, schools, and meditation apps use green to invite balance, focus, and emotional regulation. These effects aren't cultural, they're biological. Evolution wired us to read color as code. Red meant ripe fruit or spilled blood. Green meant shelter, vegetation, safety. Even infants react to these hues before they understand language. You don't think your way into these reactions. Your body reads them instantly, long before your thoughts arrive. Marketers use this. Designers rely on it. Politicians choose their ties by it. You scroll past a headline in red and feel urgency. You enter a green lobby and feel at ease. The color speaks first. Your mind translates later. So, next time your mood tilts suddenly, pause. Is it stress, fatigue, or just the color of the room soaking quietly into your nervous system? The mental rotation block. What if your empathy could block your logic? Imagine being asked to mentally rotate an object, say a chair or a cube. Most people can do it quickly, but now replace that object with a human figure. Suddenly it takes longer. You hesitate. Your brain gets stuck. This is the mental rotation block. Psychologists have found people are slower rotating human figures than objects. The reason? Empathy. When you see a human or something that resembles one, your brain treats it like a person, not geometry. And people aren't meant to twist in unnatural ways, so your mind resists. This isn't just a cognitive glitch, it's a social adaptation. The brain uses the mirror neuron system, which activates when we observe or imagine others' actions. When rotating a human figure, your brain simulates how it would feel in a real body. If the motion seems painful, it freezes. In one study, participants rotated chairs easily, but slowed when the object had arms or legs, even if it wasn't alive. The closer it looked to human, the slower the rotation. Your brain pauses. Would this hurt? And empathy delays logic. Surgeons and designers train to see the body as a system, not a self. But for most, compassion creates friction. A pause, a flicker of empathy. Logic waits. This block reveals something deeper. Your brain values people more than puzzles. Even mannequins and cartoon figures can trigger the slowdown. So, next time you're stuck visualizing something, ask yourself, are you confused or just wired to care? The number anchoring trap. What if a single number, completely unrelated, could hijack your decision-making? Imagine being asked whether Gandhi died before or after age 144. Then, you're asked to guess his actual age at death. Most people, without realizing it, will guess a higher age than if they were first asked about age 64. Why? Because of anchoring. A psychological trap where numbers, random, irrelevant numbers, silently distort our logic. This is the number anchoring trap. Anchoring happens when the brain grabs onto the first number it sees, no matter how absurd, and uses it as a reference point for everything that follows. The anchor doesn't just influence your estimate, it bends it. It becomes the hidden lens through which all subsequent information is filtered. Logic isn't immune to it. In fact, it's often enslaved by it. In one well-known study, participants spun a rigged wheel that landed on either 10 or 65. Then they were asked what percentage of African countries are members of the UN. Those who saw 65 guessed significantly higher than those who saw 10. The number on the wheel was meaningless, yet it changed their perception. Anchoring affects more than just trivia. It influences job interviews, pricing, negotiations, and legal judgments. Stores show inflated original prices to make the current deal feel better. Realtors list homes high to anchor expectations. Once the anchor is dropped, even irrelevant numbers hold immense power. Even when we're told a number is random, the brain can't shake it. Anchors offer certainty in uncertain situations. They calm the chaos, even if they mislead. This is the number anchoring trap. It's quiet, invisible, and everywhere. So next time a number sets the stage, ask yourself, am I thinking clearly, or is this just the first whisper shaping the whole story? The silent treatment, spike. What if silence could bruise the brain like a punch? Imagine walking into a room and no one looks up. You speak, but no one responds. Your existence is ignored, not violently, but completely. You're not yelled at. You're erased. This is the silent treatment spike. Psychologists have discovered that social exclusion activates the same brain regions as physical pain, specifically the anterior cingulate cortex. In one study, participants played a virtual ball tossing game. When the other players stopped passing them the ball, brain scans showed activity in the same areas triggered by bodily harm. Rejection actually hurts. The pain isn't metaphorical, it's chemical. Being socially excluded triggers the release of cortisol, your stress hormone, and suppresses dopamine. You feel unwanted, unsafe, and emotionally destabilized. And unlike physical pain, which signals tissue damage, this kind of pain signals a threat to your identity and belonging. The body registers social rejection as danger. This is why people describe heartbreak as feeling crushed or numb. It's why being ghosted or ignored can spiral into anxiety, depression, even illness. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between a slap and silence, it only knows threat. Emotional pain hijacks the same system built to keep you alive. What makes it worse? You can't prove it. You can't treat it with a bandage. And in a digital world where ignoring someone is as easy as swiping away, the wounds pile up invisibly. The silence becomes a signal. You don't matter. So if you felt that sting of being unseen, know this. It wasn't in your head. It was in your brain. And if you've used silence as punishment, ask yourself, is it distance or harm? Because silence, when weaponized, doesn't fade. It echoes. And echo pain leaves no scar, but it shapes who we become. The voice delay. Panic. What if trust could be broken by a single second of silence? Imagine you're on a video call and you ask a simple question. There's a pause, just 1 second, and your stomach tightens. Did they not hear you? Are they unsure? Are you being ignored? This is the voice delay panic, a subtle psychological response where conversational flow controls emotional comfort. In experiments, researchers found that delays as short as 1-2 seconds in conversation significantly increased negative perceptions. The speaker was rated as less friendly, less trustworthy, even less competent. Not because of what they said, but because they didn't respond fast enough. In human interaction, timing is everything. Our brains are wired for rhythm. Conversation is a dance of cues, signals, micro pauses, and synchrony. When that rhythm breaks, even slightly, uncertainty floods in. Flow isn't just aesthetic, it's a survival mechanism. Smooth conversation signals safety. Delays suggest threat, disinterest, or dishonesty. You've felt it. That awkward pause after a joke. The long second before someone answers, "I'm fine." The lag on a call that makes a simple chat feel like interrogation. When voices disconnect, so do we. Even in high-stakes situations, like job interviews or therapy, micro delays can shift the entire emotional dynamic. A counselor's thoughtful pause may read as judgment. An interviewer's brief silence can feel like disapproval. The mind fills the gap with fear. And in a digital age filled with lag, buffering, and mute buttons, the panic intensifies. Our minds read glitch as rejection. Delay becomes distance, and trust erodes, silently, invisibly, second by second. So ask yourself, how many miscommunications were caused not by words, but by timing? In the voice delay panic, it's not silence that breaks connection. It's when that silence shouldn't be there. The empathy tactile shortcut. What if feeling empathy didn't start in your mind, but in your hands? Imagine holding something soft, a piece of velvet, a warm blanket, a plush toy. Without realizing it, your mood shifts. You feel calmer, kinder, more open. This is the empathy tactile shortcut, where physical softness triggers emotional softness. Before your brain forms a thought, your fingers are already making moral decisions. In a fascinating study, participants who sat on soft chairs were more willing to compromise in negotiations than those on hard ones. Another experiment showed that simply touching something with a soft texture increased compassion toward others in distress. Why? Because touch bypasses logic. Texture becomes a signal. Soft equals safety. Safety invites connection. Softness signals it's okay to let your guard down. Your brain evolved to link touch with emotion. Babies bond through skin-to-skin contact. We soothe the sick and grieving with warmth and softness. Cultures around the world wrap their dead in cloth, not just for respect, but for care. We use the phrase soft-hearted for a reason. When your skin senses softness, your nervous system responds. Your walls drop. You become more receptive, not just to touch, but to people. Even advertising uses this trick. Think of how product packaging feels in your hand. Velvet gift boxes, satin ribbons, fleece jackets. These materials are crafted not just to feel good, but to feel safe, inviting. We don't just purchase softness, we associate it with honesty, care, and comfort. So, next time you're feeling distant, judgmental, or cold, don't just think your way into empathy, touch your way there. Because sometimes the fastest route to kindness isn't logic, it's texture. And sometimes the most powerful path to compassion begins with softness. The name bias loop. What if your name quietly shapes who you like? Imagine meeting two strangers, one named Sarah, the other Samantha. If your name is Steve, you're statistically more likely to prefer Samantha. Why? Because her name starts with the same letter. This isn't coincidence, it's the name bias loop. Psychologists call it implicit egotism, a subtle cognitive bias where we're drawn to things that reflect ourselves. We like cities, careers, and people whose names echo ours. A Daniel is more likely to marry a Dana. A Laura might lean toward a Louis. It feels like chemistry. It's actually the alphabet. Studies show people disproportionately favor letters from their own names, especially initials. That familiarity triggers comfort. It builds a bridge between self and other, even when the logic is unconscious. The ego likes mirrors, even linguistic ones. This bias creeps into hiring, dating, networking. We think we're being objective, but subtle associations tug at our judgment. A name that sounds like ours feels warmer, safer, more trustworthy. But that's not insight. It's projection. Even baby name trends reveal this loop. Parents often choose names resembling their own. In branding, companies know this too. Familiar sounds sell trust. We don't just see reflections. We hear them in names, resumes, introductions. The name feels like home, even when the person is a stranger. That's ego in disguise. It's why we must question our preferences. Is this connection real or a loop of liking ourselves? So ask yourself, how often do you choose what feels familiar and call it fate? The prediction confidence curse. What if the loudest voice in the room was also the least accurate? Imagine someone confidently predicting the stock market, election results, or tomorrow's weather, with no real background in economics, politics, or climate science. Yet somehow, their tone feels convincing. You want to believe them. Meanwhile, actual experts speak cautiously, layering their words with terms like probably or depending on conditions. This isn't just frustrating, it's a proven phenomenon. This is the prediction confidence curse. Psychologists uncovered this effect in studies of forecasters. The worst predictors, the ones whose guesses were farthest from reality, rated their confidence the highest. The more they guessed, the more convinced they became of their own ability. Not because they were right, but because they stopped questioning themselves. Meanwhile, the most accurate predictors showed lower confidence, because they understood how complex, uncertain, and chaotic real systems are. This illusion is driven by how our brains respond to certainty. Confidence feels good. It triggers reward pathways. Doubt, however, feels uncomfortable, so we avoid it. Over time, people learn to perform confidence, louder voices, simpler answers, stronger claims, and audiences, craving certainty, eat it up. It's why bold predictions go viral, why flashy media headlines outshine nuanced explanations, why we often mistake swagger for wisdom. Confidence demands attention. Accuracy whispers. The curse doesn't just live in the predictors, it infects us, the listeners. We follow the confident, even when they're wrong. We tune out the thoughtful, even when they're right. So next time someone speaks with absolute certainty, pause. Don't ask how confident they sound. Ask, how often have they actually been right? The mirror self, distortion. What if the face in the mirror isn't really yours? Imagine standing in front of a mirror, staring at your reflection for 10 minutes. At first, everything looks normal, but then slowly something shifts. Your features begin to distort. Your face warps, stretching, twisting, becoming someone or something unfamiliar. Some see monsters, others strangers. This is the mirror self-distortion effect. Psychologists call it the strange face illusion. In dim lighting, prolonged mirror gazing causes your brain's facial recognition systems to destabilize. Your brain begins editing your face in real time, warping, blending, reinventing. Familiarity collapses under stillness. The image turns uncanny, even terrifying. Why? Because your brain isn't just a passive mirror, it's an active interpreter. It updates what you see based on expectation, emotion, and attention. When you stare too long, the brain tries to recalibrate. But without motion or variety, it starts to invent. Your face becomes a canvas for psychological projection. Your shame, doubt, or fear may twist your features before your eyes. This illusion reveals something deeper. Your sense of self is more fluid than fixed. The mirror shows not just your face, but your fears, distortions, and disconnections. Identity, it turns out, isn't stable. It's stitched from memory, emotion, and moment-to-moment perception. You are not one thing. You are the sum of shifting narratives rendered into skin. So, next time you look into a mirror and something shifts, maybe it's not the mirror playing tricks. Maybe it's you, catching a glimpse of how fragile your reflection really is, because the face you know can become a stranger. And maybe it always was. Maybe your identity isn't something you see. It's something you continually choose to believe. What if your true character wasn't revealed by your successes, but by how you handle a blocked path? Imagine this. You're told to complete a simple task for a reward. Halfway through, something breaks. A door jams. A page won't load. A minor glitch stalls the prize. Do you wait calmly? Do you problem solve? Or do you lash out, curse, give up? This is the frustration block test. It's not about the obstacle, it's about your reaction. In experiments, researchers introduced small, unexpected delays into routine tasks. People's responses varied wildly. Some grew aggressive, others froze. A few adapted, even laughed. The same block, different behaviors. What changed wasn't the challenge. It was the emotional architecture inside each person. This test reveals what intellect can't. Delay tolerance is a window into self-regulation, emotional endurance, and stress wiring. It shows how deeply we link speed with worth. The longer something takes, the less value we believe it has. But that's not truth. It's impatience disguised as logic. Consider the moments that trigger the strongest reactions. Waiting for a slow download, a late reply, a traffic jam. These aren't emergencies, but they reveal the raw wiring underneath. Some grow irritable, others spiral, a few remain grounded. Their advantage isn't knowledge, it's nervous system training. And in today's instant world, 2-day shipping, one-click answers, lightning-fast dopamine, we're trained to hate delay. So when life stutters, many panic. But those who don't, who breathe, pause, reframe, those people unlock power most never touch. Patience becomes strategy. Stillness becomes skill. So ask yourself, when your path gets blocked, what shows up first? Your wisdom or your wound? In the frustration block test, patience isn't passive. It's proof of emotional depth. What if your worst day wasn't actually worse, but just felt that way because of the calendar? Imagine waking up on a Monday. You already feel the weight. Everything seems heavier. People annoy you more. Work feels harder. But nothing's really changed since yesterday, except the name of the day. This is the Monday mood bias, the phenomenon where people report higher stress, lower motivation, and worse moods simply because it's Monday. Not because of what's happening, but because of what they expect to feel. In multiple studies, participants consistently ranked Mondays as their most stressful day, even when their workload was no different from Tuesday. Some couldn't even recall specific problems, just a cloud of heaviness. Why? Because Monday isn't just a time marker, it's a cultural ritual. It carries with it the story of pressure, obligation, and loss of freedom. Over time, we've trained our emotions to obey the calendar. The brain doesn't just react, it anticipates. If you expect Monday to be exhausting, your nervous system starts bracing. Cortisol rises. Muscle tension creeps in. Your attention narrows, primed for stress. You interpret small annoyances as major irritations. You call it Monday energy, but really, it's memory in disguise. Mood follows prediction, and prediction follows tradition. But time is elastic. It bends to belief. The calendar doesn't control you, and you help write it. Changing Monday doesn't require quitting your job. It means rewriting the script. Start with one act of joy, one pattern broken, one expectation refused. Because Monday isn't cursed, it's coded, and you have the power to change what it means. What if time didn't slow down? Your brain just sped up. Imagine a car skidding toward you, or a fall that seems to stretch forever. Everything feels slower, every detail sharp, every sound drawn out. This isn't magic. It's the trauma time freeze. When you face danger, your brain doesn't alter the laws of physics. It changes perception. In terrifying moments, the amygdala floods your system with stress hormones. Your senses sharpen, attention narrows, and most importantly, your brain takes more mental snapshots, like raising a camera's frame rate. More frames mean more detail, and more detail makes time feel stretched. This isn't about real time, it's about memory density. Later, when you recall the event, there are more moments to process. So, the fall seems longer. The crash feels eternal. It's your brain's way of making sure you learned what you needed to survive. In studies, people who experienced accidents consistently overestimated the time events took. But, when tested, they couldn't perceive time more slowly in the moment. They simply remembered more. It's a survival mechanism, a freeze frame of danger. Not to paralyze you, but to prepare you. To catalog every possible cue so you can avoid it next time. Soldiers often describe combat this way, seconds expanding into eternities. Survivors of car crashes remember the blink before impact in cinematic clarity. Time doesn't bend. Your brain activates an ancient defense. Remember everything. It might be your last moment. In that flood of intensity, the mind opens every sense and slams record. So ask yourself, was that second truly longer? Or did your brain just refuse to let a single piece of it slip by? What if words could change how you feel pain? Imagine plunging your hand into ice water. The sting builds fast, sharp, relentless, biting at your skin. Your instinct is to pull away. But now, imagine someone nearby, speaking gently, staying with you. You're okay. You're doing great. Just breathe. I'm here. Strangely, you hold on longer. The pain doesn't disappear, but it softens. This is the ice water threshold, a strange psychological effect where comfort changes cold. In a well-known study, researchers had participants submerge their hands in near freezing water and endure it for as long as possible. One group sat alone in silence. Another was accompanied by someone offering calm, encouraging words. The difference in endurance was measurable. Those receiving support held on longer, reported less pain, and recovered faster. It wasn't just willpower. It was the brain rewriting what pain meant. Pain is never purely physical. It's shaped by context, emotion, memory. When we're alone, pain feels isolating, sharper, but with connection, even just words, our mind tells a new story. You are not alone. This is hard, but you are safe. Athletes train for this. Therapists rely on it. Even battlefield medics use it instinctively, reassurance and presence, to dull what no medicine can touch in the moment. Words aren't weak. They're tools of endurance. This is the ice water threshold, a reminder that resilience is not only about grit, it's about who stands beside us. That kind words don't just warm hearts. They literally change our relationship with discomfort. So, next time someone's hurting, physically or emotionally, don't underestimate your presence. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply stay and speak. What if your memories weren't just shaped by what happened, but by what you heard? Imagine looking back on a perfect day. Sunshine, laughter. But now, imagine replaying that memory while a sad song plays. Suddenly, it doesn't feel so perfect. Something is off. A shadow falls across the smile. This is the soundtrack manipulation effect. Studies show that music doesn't just reflect emotion, it rewrites memory. When you pair a song with a scene, your brain fuses the two. A joyful event remembered with sad music becomes bittersweet. A painful event layered with uplifting music can be softened, even reinterpreted. Music becomes the emotional ink in your memory's journal. What you hear shapes what you feel about what you lived. Neurologically, music activates the amygdala, the brain's emotion processor, and the hippocampus, which encodes memory. When they fire together, they bind what you feel with what you recall. But here's the twist. That fusion is flexible. Change the music, and the memory reshapes itself. Your past is more fluid than fixed. The soundtrack becomes the story, and it can be rewritten without your permission. This is why a breakup song can make a good memory hurt. Why a nostalgic melody can resurface joy from grief. It's why film scores move us, not because of what we see, but because of what we hear while seeing. Music becomes the emotional filter through which memory passes, and sometimes it tints the truth. So next time you revisit a memory, pay attention to the music in the background, because it's not just a soundtrack, it's a sculptor. And sometimes the notes we hear in the present rewrite the stories we thought we knew. Your past can be remixed, and every song might be a revision of you. What if the harder you tried to forget something, the stronger it became? Imagine this. Don't think about a white bear. Try it. For the next 10 seconds, avoid that image completely. Most people fail. The bear appears, uninvited, persistent, louder than before. This is the thought suppression rebound, the paradox where resisting a thought gives it more power. In classic experiments by psychologist Daniel Wegner, participants were asked to avoid thinking about something specific, like that white bear. Almost immediately, the forbidden thought began dominating their mental landscape. Suppression wasn't silence, it was amplification. The brain doesn't erase well, it replaces, distracts, or obsesses. This rebound effect shows up everywhere, trying not to think about an ex, a trauma, an intrusive fear. The more forcefully you push it down, the more it pushes back. That's because attention is fuel. Even resistance is a kind of focus. And focus keeps the loop alive. It's not just emotional, it's neurological. The act of suppression requires monitoring. Am I thinking it now? That question itself revives the thought. You create a feedback loop of self-checking that guarantees repetition. We do it with pain, with grief, with desire. The moment we declare war on a thought, we hand it power. It grows not through truth, but through tension. The white bear becomes a monster. Not because it's real, but because we keep it locked behind mental bars it can rattle. Ironically, acceptance, naming the thought, watching it without judgment, is what weakens its grip. The less you fight it, the faster it fades. Suppression is struggle. Awareness is escape. Suffering hides in resistance. So ask yourself, what thought are you feeding by resisting it? In the thought suppression rebound, the mind doesn't forget through force. It finds peace through attention without attachment. What if the feeling of being watched had nothing to do with eyes, but with emptiness itself? Imagine standing in a dark hallway or walking past a doorway at night. You glance over, not because you saw something, but because you didn't. That stillness, that lack of motion, pulls at your attention like a silent whisper. This is the void glance instinct, the ancient reflex to assign awareness to darkness, to emptiness, to the places where nothing should be. Your brain isn't responding to a threat, it's responding to the possibility of one. From an evolutionary perspective, this instinct is pure survival. In ancient times, those who noticed the flicker in the bushes or the stillness in a cave survived. The unknown was dangerous, and darkness made everything unknown. The brain learned to treat empty spaces not as neutral, but as potentially occupied. We evolved to expect danger in absence, to hear breath in the silence, to imagine eyes in the shadows. That flicker of fear you feel when looking into the dark isn't irrational. It's inherited. In modern studies, people report heightened vigilance in low-light environments, even when they consciously know they're alone. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates in response to ambiguous spaces. And sometimes, that activation feels like presence. You don't just see darkness, you feel something in it. Maybe it's paranoia. Maybe it's ancient pattern recognition. This instinct even shapes our myths. Haunted houses, glowing eyes, The idea that something stares back from the void. It's not proof of the supernatural. It's proof that your brain prefers false alarms over missing the one moment that mattered. So, next time you glance toward the dark, don't call it silly. It's not fear. It's your mind trying to see what might be watching, before it's too late. The flashbulb memory illusion. What if your clearest memory is also your most inaccurate? Imagine recalling where you were during a tragedy. The sounds, the smells, the faces around you. The image feels frozen in time, sharp as a photograph. But here's the illusion. Vivid doesn't mean true. This is the flashbulb memory illusion. After major events, 9/11s, a car crash, a sudden loss, people often report crystal clear memories. Psychologists once believed that these were special, etched into the mind like snapshots. But research revealed something else. While people felt confident, their details shifted over time. The accuracy eroded, but the certainty didn't. That's because emotion supercharges memory, but not in the way we think. High stress and trauma increase the feeling of clarity, not the reliability of recall. The amygdala tags memories as urgent, but not accurate. In one study, participants were asked to recall their memories of a national tragedy immediately after it happened, and again a year later. Most stories had changed, but their confidence hadn't. That's the danger. You're sure of something that may never have happened the way you remember it. Flashbulb memories aren't photographs. They're stories your brain reinforces each time you tell them, edited unconsciously to fit your identity, your emotions, your meaning. Disaster witnesses often disagree on words, faces, even timing, yet each believes their version is right. Not because they lie, but because emotion locks in certainty, not truth. So ask yourself, what if the moment you remember most vividly is also the one you've rewritten the most? What if the thing you haven't finished is the one your brain won't let go of? Imagine starting a task, writing an email, reading a book, having a conversation, but leaving it halfway. Hours later, it's still in your mind, echoing like a half-played melody. This isn't just inconvenience, it's a cognitive glitch known as the completion Zeal loop, rooted in the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain remembers unfinished tasks more vividly and more emotionally than completed ones. In the 1920s, psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik made a simple but stunning observation. Waiters could recall unpaid orders with great precision, but forgot them quickly after the bill was paid. The task's incompleteness kept it active in their minds. Later lab experiments proved it. Our memory system tags unfinished business as a priority. The brain doesn't like loose ends. It replays them. This is why cliffhangers work. Why interrupted conversations keep you up at night. Why that one task you didn't complete 5 days ago still nags at you. The brain treats unfinished work as unresolved tension, not because it's dangerous, but because it breaks the mental need for narrative closure. Marketers exploit this. Writers use it ruthlessly. Apps deploy red icons, notifications, loading bars, tiny psychological levers designed to trigger your completion drive. You're not obsessed. You're caught in a loop. The completion Zeal loop isn't about guilt. It's about cognitive tension. Your brain craves resolution like lungs crave air. Until the loop is closed, the thought keeps cycling, growing louder with every hour. So, next time something won't leave your mind, pause and ask, is this thought important? Or just unfinished business screaming to be resolved? The crowd yell conformity. What if the louder you yell, the less you exist as an individual? Imagine being in a packed stadium. Tension builds. A goal is scored or a foul is called, and suddenly you're screaming, louder than you thought possible. You're not trying to be heard. You're not even thinking. You're swept. This is the crowd yell conformity. Psychologists call it de-individuation, the loss of self-awareness in groups. In crowds, identity blurs. The mind doesn't ask, is this me? It asks, is this us? And when the group shouts, you shout. Not because you choose to, but because the self that chooses has thinned. The voice becomes collective. The boundaries dissolve between thought and impulse. Studies have shown that people in groups take more risks, shout louder, and show more extreme emotion. This isn't just peer pressure, it's the collapse of boundaries. Your voice rises not just to match others, but because your nervous system is syncing with theirs. The body follows the roar. You lose the mirror of self-reflection and gain the flood of shared emotion. That's why mobs form, why riots escalate, why chants feel powerful even when words lose meaning. It's not just about the cause, it's about the chemistry. The group becomes your compass, emotion amplifies, reason shrinks, and volume surges as identity dissolves. In the noise, self-awareness flickers out. But there's beauty in it too, singing in unison, protesting for justice, celebrating as one. The same loss of self can create unity, catharsis, transcendence. It's not always chaos. Sometimes it's communion, a sacred noise louder than any one person could produce alone. So, next time you raise your voice in a crowd, pause and ask, who's speaking? Is it me or us? And if you listen closely, you might hear the answer in your own echo. What if your tears over a fictional character were as real as mourning someone you knew? Imagine watching your favorite show and a beloved character dies. You feel a weight in your chest. You cry, ache, mourn, and part of you wonders, why? You never met them. They weren't real, but your grief is. This is the fiction attachment study, and it proves something remarkable. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between story pain and real loss. In brain scans, the same regions light up whether you lose a loved one or a character you've bonded with deeply. Mirror neurons fire, empathy circuits activate. Your body doesn't ask if it's fiction. It only asks if it feels real, and if it does, it mourns. The tears are real. The heartbreak is chemical. This isn't weakness. It's storytelling at its most powerful. We are wired to connect through narrative. Characters become emotional surrogates. Their victories are our joy. Their pain becomes our heartbreak. Your body stores it all the same, embedded in emotional memory. In one study, people who lost a favorite character reported symptoms mirroring real bereavement: sadness, irritability, emotional fatigue. Their minds knew the difference. Their hearts didn't. And perhaps that's the point. Fiction lets us explore grief safely, process feelings we may not understand, and feel deeply without direct loss. It explains why people hold funerals for characters, revisit the same pages or episodes, or carry story quotes like scripture. These aren't just fans, they're mourners, because the mind doesn't love with conditions, it loves with presence, and presence can live inside fiction. So ask yourself, who have you cried for that never truly lived? In the fiction attachment study, what you feel isn't fake. It's proof that the heart treats story as memory, and love as real, even on a page. What if a single flavor could break open your past? Imagine biting into a pastry you haven't tasted in years, and suddenly, you're 5 years old in your grandmother's kitchen. The tablecloth, the laughter, the smell of rain outside, it all floods back, fully formed. This is the taste-memory imprint, the powerful link between flavor and memory, wired directly into the limbic system, the brain's emotional archive. Unlike sight or sound, which pass through layers of cognitive processing, taste connects directly to regions like the amygdala and hippocampus, centers of emotion and memory. That's why a single flavor can bypass years of forgetfulness and bring you face to face with feelings you didn't know you still carried. It doesn't just remind you of a moment, it resurrects the emotional atmosphere around it. In studies, participants were significantly more likely to recall detailed emotional memories when triggered by flavor than by images or sounds. Vanilla might pull you back to childhood birthdays. Cinnamon might remind you of heartbreak, winter, or home. The body remembers long after the conscious mind forgets. Marketers know this. So do chefs and food stylists. That's why comfort food works. It's not just about flavor, it's about the time and place that flavor lives in. Taste is nostalgia made edible. It's memory in the form of sensation. But this connection can also sting. A meal from a painful chapter can revive sadness, anxiety, or grief. That's the price of direct access. Your tongue becomes a key to doors your mind thought were sealed. So, next time you taste something that hits too hard or heals too fast, pause. You're not just eating. You're remembering through one of the oldest and most honest senses you have. What if caring too much eventually numbs you? Imagine watching tragedy after tragedy, on the news, in your feed, in real life. At first you hurt for each one, but over time, something changes. The ache dulls. The tears dry faster. This is the empathy fatigue experiment. Psychologists call it compassion fatigue. It's when your ability to feel for others wears thin, not from apathy, but protection. Empathy is a finite resource. When you're exposed to repeated suffering, your mind begins to shut down its emotional response to avoid overload. You become desensitized, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. In one study, Nurses and emergency responders reported feeling less emotional impact from trauma over time, not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't keep absorbing pain without breaking. It happens to anyone who constantly witnesses suffering. The heart pulls back to survive. This fatigue doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're full. Your brain, flooded with distress signals, starts conserving emotional energy. It's a defense mechanism, like a circuit breaker for compassion. Even scrolling through headlines can wear down your empathy reserves. The first image shocks, the 10th one drains, and by the 100th, you feel nothing and wonder what's wrong with you. It's not failure, it's overload. Empathy isn't infinite, but it's resilient. Like a muscle, it weakens without rest, but recovers with care. With rest and boundaries, it can return. So ask yourself, are you emotionally absent or just running on empty? What if the secret to getting more done wasn't motivation, but a list? Imagine you have a dozen things to do. You feel overwhelmed, scattered, but then you write them down, even the obvious ones. Make bed, drink water, send email. Now something shifts. Each checkmark becomes a tiny victory. You feel momentum. This isn't just productivity advice, it's a neurological trick called the checklist compliance hack, a simple structure that unlocks action, focus, and emotional reward. Psychologists have found that people are significantly more likely to complete tasks when they're listed, even tasks they already intended to do. Why? Because the brain craves structure. A checklist isn't just a reminder, it's a visual contract. Each item is a commitment. Each checkmark is closure. Without it, tasks blur and anxiety builds. With it, things become doable. Neurologically, every time you check something off, your brain releases a small dose of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter linked to pleasure, addiction, and motivation. It doesn't matter how trivial the task was. Completion is the key. That's why so many people write down things they've already done, just to cross them off. It gives the brain a hit, and that hit fuels the next action. Even in high-stakes professions, pilots, surgeons, firefighters, checklists are sacred tools, not because these people forget easily, but because checklists reduce mental strain. They turn chaos into sequence. In emergencies, they save lives. This is the checklist compliance hack, not a gimmick, but a gateway, a method that turns vague intention into visible progress. So, next time you feel stuck, don't wait for inspiration. Just write it down, cross it out, and let structure do what willpower alone often can't. What if belief in aliens revealed more about your brain than about outer space? Imagine seeing strange lights in the sky. Your friend sees nothing. You, however, sense a pattern, movement, rhythm, intent. It's not proof. It's a feeling. This is the alien contact openness test. Psychologists have discovered a fascinating link. People who believe in extraterrestrial life tend to score higher on tests of pattern recognition, even in random noise. They find connections in scattered stars, meaning in static, faces in clouds. Their minds are wired to detect structure, even when none exists. This isn't delusion, it's heightened sensitivity. Their brains are tuned like antennas, wide open to pattern, possibility, and the unknown. This trait, called apophenia, is the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in meaningless data. It's why you might see a UFO in a shadow, or hear messages in white noise. It's the same cognitive wiring that helps artists find symbols, scientists discover theories, and inventors see new uses for old tools. Creativity and belief dance on the edge of logic. But there's a cost. That same openness makes you more vulnerable to false positives. You might find signals where there are none, meaning where there's only chance. The brain becomes a pattern-hunting machine, brilliant, creative, but sometimes fooled. It chases ghosts in data and turns coincidence into design. Still, it raises a question. Is it better to miss the truth or imagine it too soon? Some of history's greatest discoveries began with leaps of faith, by people who saw what others couldn't. Galileo, Tesla, Kepler, dreamers and heretics. So when you hear someone say they believe in aliens, maybe don't ask, where's the proof? Ask, what does your mind see that mine doesn't? Because openness to contact might begin with openness to possibility. And sometimes, belief is the first antenna to touch the unknown. What if the fastest way to bond with a stranger was to get stuck in an elevator together? Imagine this. The doors jam shut. The lights flicker. Silence falls. You and four strangers are trapped. At first, it's awkward, but within minutes, someone cracks a joke. Another person shares a story. Laughter bubbles up. Anxiety softens into connection. This is the stuck elevator unity effect. A strange truth about human nature: shared stress dissolves walls faster than comfort ever could. In psychological studies, people exposed to mild crisis situations, broken down buses, stalled meetings, unexpected power outages, report feeling closer to those around them afterward. It's not the setting that binds them, it's the mutual discomfort. When survival instincts kick in, social masks drop. Ego quiets. We see each other more clearly. Even short-term stress activates oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Our brains begin scanning for allies. Suddenly that stranger isn't background noise. They're part of your tribe. You become collaborators in a mini-struggle, even if it's just boredom or inconvenience. Think about it. Strangers in waiting rooms exchange secrets. Co-workers stuck in long meetings invent inside jokes. People stranded at airports share chargers, snacks, and stories they might never tell a friend. Crisis makes us human, raw, honest, present. That's why disaster survivors describe deep intimacy with people they barely knew. Why soldiers form unbreakable ties. Why strangers on a stalled subway car feel like comrades in a fleeting war. Adversity compresses time. It creates emotional shortcuts. So ask yourself, who have you connected with simply because you suffered the same moment? In the stuck elevator unity effect, crisis isn't just chaos, it's the birthplace of unexpected kinship. Sometimes the door jams not to trap you, but to introduce you to someone you might have never seen. The pain price fallacy. What if the amount you pay for relief determines how much relief you actually feel? Imagine two people take the same painkiller. One was told it cost $50, the other just $5. Same pill, same dosage. But the one who paid more reports greater pain relief. This is the pain price fallacy, where your brain doesn't just process medicine, it interprets value, and price somehow changes pain. In one famous study, participants were given identical pills but told different prices. Those who believed they were taking an expensive treatment reported significantly more pain reduction than those told it was cheap. Their bodies responded not just to chemistry, but to expectation. The higher the price, the stronger the belief. The stronger the belief, the greater the effect. Perception rewrote sensation. This isn't placebo in the usual sense. It's something deeper. Your brain rewriting experience based on perceived worth. Your wallet influences your nervous system. Value becomes a chemical, and the brain, desperate to make the cost worth it, delivers on that belief by dialing down pain. We don't just buy pills, we buy promises about purity, power, exclusivity, and those promises become biology. It happens with supplements, therapies, procedures, even fake surgeries. The more it costs, the more we're convinced it must work. And sometimes, it actually does. But there's a dark side. It means your body can under-respond when it thinks you got a deal. Relief, it turns out, isn't just swallowed, it's sold. So, next time you feel better, pause and ask, is this working because it's effective or because it's expensive? What if stepping into someone else's shoes makes you judge them harder? Imagine criticizing someone for being lazy, emotional, or reckless. Then one day, you're in their position. You face the same pressure, the same fear, the same failure. But instead of finding empathy, you get angry. This is the role reversal rage. Psychologists have observed that when people experience the same hardship they once judged, they don't always soften. Sometimes they double down. Why? Because now the shame is personal. The failure reflects them. And to protect their ego, they push the blame harder. It's projection wrapped in denial. We hate seeing in us what we once mocked in others. And when our past judgment meets present experience, something snaps. The result isn't compassion. It's rage. In one study, people who faced a difficult task, after watching others fail, were more likely to condemn the original person. Their struggle didn't breed understanding. It bred resentment. As if admitting the situation was hard would mean admitting they were wrong before. We say experience breeds empathy, but it doesn't always. Sometimes it reveals hypocrisy, and that's uncomfortable. So the brain flips the narrative. Instead of, I understand, it says, they still failed. Parents who once mocked crying children find themselves overwhelmed by emotion as adults and feel shame. Workers who blamed the unemployed get laid off. and feel bitterness instead. The anger comes from ego defending against contradiction. It's easier to get mad than admit we were wrong. So ask yourself, when did you last judge someone for a weight you hadn't yet carried? And what happened when you finally had to lift it? The memory reinforcement trigger. What if every time you remembered something, you accidentally changed it? Imagine revisiting a childhood moment, the smell of a summer breeze, the warmth of laughter, the color of your bike. Each time you recall it, the details feel sharper. But here's the twist. Memory doesn't replay like a video. It rewrites like a story. This is the memory reinforcement trigger, the strange truth that remembering makes memories stronger, but also more distorted. Neuroscientists have shown that every time a memory is recalled, it becomes temporarily unstable, like wet cement. During that short window, your brain can alter details, insert new ones, or erase pieces before storing it again. This process is called reconsolidation. It's adaptive. It helps us evolve emotionally, but it also opens the door to error. In one study, participants watched a video of a car accident. Later, researchers used different phrasing when asking about the crash. Words like hit versus smashed. Those subtle shifts created drastically different recollections. Some participants remembered broken glass that wasn't there. Their memory changed to fit the story they were subtly fed. And the more you recall something, the more confident you feel, regardless of accuracy. Emotion sharpens the illusion. Imagination fills gaps. Time blurs facts. What you think you remember perfectly might be a patchwork of feelings, guesses, and self-protective edits. This is the memory reinforcement trigger. The more often you revisit a memory, the deeper it sets and the more it bends. It becomes less about what truly happened and more about what your mind needed it to be. So, next time you say, "I remember exactly what happened," pause. You might be defending the version your brain sculpted, not the truth that once was. What if your sense of time changed just to protect your sense of meaning? Imagine flipping a switch. A light turns on. To you, the light flashes instantly. But if someone else flipped it, that same delay would feel longer. Your brain edits time, compressing it, because you caused it. This is the temporal binding bias. Psychologists have discovered that when people initiate an action that causes an effect, their brain pulls the events closer together in time. Action and consequence are bound, temporally stitched into a single unit of meaning. The delay shrinks. Cause and effect blur. Your mind rewrites the timeline to make sense of agency. This bias has been measured in labs. Participants press a button and a tone plays shortly after. When they're the one pressing the button, they report the tone as happening sooner. But when a machine triggers the same tone, the perceived delay increases. The timeline stretches. Agency changes perception. Why? Because your brain wants coherence. It wants the world to reflect your intentions. So it distorts time to reinforce that you made something happen. It's not about accuracy. It's about control. The illusion of instant results strengthens the feeling of being in charge. But this has consequences. You might underestimate delays in outcomes you control, overestimate delays in things others do, misjudge responsibility. And yet, this distortion is also empowering. It ties effort to impact, intention to result, self to story. So, next time something happens and it feels faster just because you made it happen, ask yourself, did time really shrink? Or did your brain just pull events closer to keep your narrative intact? Because in the mind's eye, time doesn't always flow. It follows the plot. What if silence made you more vulnerable, not to danger, but to persuasion? Imagine sitting alone in a soundproof room. No music, no background noise, no hum of machines, just silence. And then someone speaks. Their voice feels louder, clearer, sharper. The words linger. This is the silence suggestion boost, the strange effect where people become more suggestible in absolute quiet. In hypnotic settings and therapeutic environments, silence isn't just absence, it's amplifier. Without distraction, the mind opens. There's nothing to compete with incoming language. The conscious brain relaxes. The subconscious becomes more accessible. Like roots pressing into soft soil, words take hold deeper. Research shows that in quiet spaces, people are more likely to follow subtle cues, accept suggestions, and remember instructions. Advertisers, therapists, even cult leaders know this. Silence increases absorption. It slows the brain's resistance and creates a state of inner readiness. You don't just hear, You receive. Think about meditation, prayer, confession. All occur in stillness. And in that stillness, words gain weight. A compliment becomes profound. A command feels powerful. A story becomes immersive. Silence sets the stage, and what enters is remembered longer, felt deeper. It also explains why some memories stay with us forever. The things whispered in dark rooms, the quiet promises made before sleep, the words you couldn't forget even when you wanted to. Silence doesn't erase, it engraves. So ask yourself, what words have you accepted simply because there was nothing else to drown them out? In the silent suggestion boost, influence doesn't need volume. It only needs stillness to echo. What if the closer you got to success, the more your fear told you to run? Imagine working for years toward a dream. Then, finally, you're inches away. The deal is almost done. The audition is tomorrow. The big moment is real. And suddenly, you procrastinate. You pick a fight. You sabotage the thing you wanted most. This is the success proximity panic, when being near your goal triggers fear not of failure, but of identity collapse. Psychologists have found that people often self-sabotage when success is within reach, not because they doubt the outcome, but because they fear what success will demand. Who will I become if I win? Will people still accept me? What if I can't sustain it? These aren't questions of skill, they're questions of self-concept, questions of who you're allowed to be. Success requires an identity shift. From student to leader, from dreamer to doer, from outsider to center stage. And that shift threatens the safety of who you've been. The brain, wired for familiarity, resists transformation, even the kind you've prayed for. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar joy. In studies, people close to achieving their goals reported more anxiety than those far from them. They feared judgment, rejection, and the pressure to live up to their future. So, they found ways to delay or destroy the outcome, not consciously, but instinctively. Because change, even good change, feels like danger to the ancient brain. This panic wears many disguises: perfectionism, distraction, sudden fatigue, irrational decisions. But beneath it all is the same fear. Once I succeed, I won't know who I am anymore. So next time you're close to a breakthrough and feel like running, pause. That fear isn't a stop sign, it's a signal. You're closer than you've ever been. Don't mistake transformation for danger. It's not the end of you, it's the becoming. What if a strand of DNA could change how you see yourself? Imagine being told a gene in your body makes you more prone to anxiety or creativity. Suddenly the way you act doesn't just feel like personality, it feels like fate. This is the DNA ownership effect. Studies show that when people are told a behavior is linked to their genetics, something shifts. If it's a negative trait, they might feel less blame. It's not me, it's my biology. But if it's a positive trait, they often feel more pride, more ownership. That's just how I'm built. Either way, the belief in a genetic link rewires responsibility. This isn't just theoretical. In one experiment, participants who were told they had a gene associated with poor impulse control were more likely to justify their bad behavior afterward. Another group, told they had a gene for empathy, rated themselves as more compassionate, regardless of their actual test scores. The DNA doesn't change, but the story around it does. And that story reshapes behavior. It reveals something powerful. The belief in a biological cause alters how we treat others and ourselves. It can be liberating, or it can be limiting. It can justify, or it can inspire. Genes aren't excuses, but they are explanations. And sometimes, explanations become identities. Insurance companies have debated whether genetic information should impact coverage. Courts have faced cases where genes were blamed for crimes. And in daily life, people use ancestry tests to explain quirks, habits, even fears. The moment biology enters the conversation, accountability begins to shift. So ask yourself, when you say, "I'm just wired this way," are you owning it or escaping it? The infinite self-test. What if your beliefs weren't just thoughts, but shields against fear? Imagine being reminded that one day you will die. Suddenly your views feel sharper, more important. You cling tighter to your religion, your politics, your culture. This isn't random. It's called terror management theory, the idea that when mortality becomes real, belief becomes armor. But here's the twist. When people reflect not on death, but on infinity, the eternal, the vast unknown, they often loosen their grip. This is the infinite self-test. Psychologists have long observed that mortality salience, reminders of death, make people more defensive, tribal, and rigid in their thinking. When we're aware of our own end, we double down on identity, we build walls, we shout louder. Beliefs become barriers to fear. But in newer studies, researchers had participants contemplate the infinite, the vastness of space, the stretch of time beyond comprehension, the unending mystery of what might be. And something shifted. Instead of clinging tighter, people relaxed. They felt smaller, but not insignificant, more like part of something immense. Awe replaced fear. The self felt less urgent, less separate. And with that shift came peace, openness, even curiosity. Why does this happen? Because death threatens the self. But infinity erases the self. When you realize your existence is a fleeting moment in a boundless expanse, ego fades. You stop needing to be right. You start listening. This is the infinite self-test. When we focus on death, we retreat into certainty. But when we face infinity, we surrender. And in that surrender is not weakness, but strength born from perspective. So, next time you find yourself clinging to a belief, a label, a fight, pause, look up. Let infinity wash over you. And remember, peace doesn't come from winning the argument. Sometimes, it comes from remembering how vast this moment really is.